The Intrepid was a small ship in the vast emptiness of space. Weeks of uneventful patrols had lulled the crew into a false sense of security. The endless expanse outside their windows, once a source of wonder, had become a monotonous backdrop to their daily routines. Captain Eva Martinez sat at her station, the ship's engines a steady drone in the background. She'd spent most of her life in space, following in her father's footsteps. Exploration, discovery, that was what space meant to her. But today, a sense of unease gnawed at her. The recycled air tasted stale, and the usual hum of the ship seemed to carry an unfamiliar undertone. "Captain," the sensor operator's voice crackled over the comm, his usually steady tone laced with tension. "We have a contact. Large object, bearings 037 Mark 19. Eva's pulse quickened. "On screen," she ordered, her voice betraying a hint of the apprehension she felt. The image that slowly materialized sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't a ship built by human hands. It was massive, dwarfing the Intrepid. Its form was a twisted, nightmarish fusion of unfamiliar metals and pulsating organic matter. A faint, eerie light pulsed from its surface, casting an unnatural glow against the backdrop of the stars. It hung there, motionless, a silent sentinel in the void. "No transponder signal, Captain," the comm officer reported, his voice strained. "No response to hails." The silence that followed was heavy and oppressive. It was a violation of every protocol, a chilling reminder that they were venturing into the truly unknown. Dr. Liu, the science officer, leaned forward, his eyes wide with a mix of fascination and fear. "Nothing in the database even comes close, Captain. The technology is alien. Very alien." "Full sensor sweep," Eva commanded, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "I want to know everything we can about that ship." The Intrepid came alive, and every sensor focused on the alien vessel. Data poured in, a torrent of information that only deepened the mystery. The ship's technology was ancient, yet far beyond anything humanity possessed. "Captain," Dr. Liu's voice was barely a whisper, "the ship's power source, it's organic. A living ship." The words echoed in the stunned silence of the bridge. Lieutenant Turner, the youngest member of the crew, his face drained of color, stammered, "A living ship? You're sure?" Dr. Liu nodded grimly. Eva's mind raced. A living ship. What did it mean? What did it want? "Prepare a probe," she ordered, her voice a mask over her growing unease. "We need a closer look." The Intrepid crept forward, the alien ship looming larger with every passing moment. Eva's breath hitched as it filled the main screen, its strange form a chilling juxtaposition of metal and flesh. The probe launched, a tiny metal insect venturing into the maw of the unknown. It approached the alien vessel, sensors scanning, sending back data. Then, the alien ship reacted. Its organic growths pulsed, sickly light washing over the probe. The signal cut out abruptly. "We lost it," the comm officer's voice was barely a whisper. The silence returned, heavier than before. They had disturbed something ancient and unknown, and now it knew they were there. The alien ship began to move. A collective gasp escaped the crew as the alien ship stirred from its slumber. The image on the main screen shifted. The ship was no longer a static silhouette against the stars, but a monstrous entity coming to life. Its organic growths pulsed and writhed, the eerie luminescence intensifying, casting long, dancing shadows across the bridge of the Intrepid. Eva's breath caught in her throat. The ship was moving, its trajectory a direct intercept course with their vessel. "Red alert," she barked, her voice amplified through the ship's speakers. "All hands to battle stations." The Intrepid shook as its engines roared to life, thrusters firing in a desperate attempt to evade the oncoming behemoth. But the alien ship was faster, closing the distance with impossible speed. "Evasive maneuvers," Eva shouted, her hands flying across the controls. The Intrepid twisted and turned, dodging through the void like a rabbit fleeing a wolf. But the alien ship anticipated their every move, its course adjusting with an unnerving precision. "It's gaining on us," The comm officer's voice was a panicked cry. Eva gritted her teeth, her knuckles white on the controls. Weapon systems online. Target the alien vessel. The Intrepid's cannons roared, spitting fire into the darkness. Explosions blossomed against the alien ship's surface, but the damage seemed superficial. The organic growths pulsed and shifted, the wounds closing almost instantly. "It's not working," the weapons officer shouted. "Our weapons are useless." Despair washed over Eva. They were outmatched, outgunned. The alien ship was a predator, and they were its prey. She glanced at her crew, their faces etched with fear and desperation. She had to do something, anything, to protect them. "Brace for impact," Eva ordered, her voice a strained whisper. The alien ship closed in, its maw gaping open, a hungry abyss ready to swallow them whole. The impact was not what Eva expected. Instead of a bone-shattering collision, there was a sickening lurch as the Intrepid was enveloped by the alien ship. The lights went out, plunging the bridge into darkness. The alarms fell silent, replaced by an eerie quiet. Eva blinked, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The viewport was gone, replaced by a wall of pulsating, organic tissue. The ship creaked and groaned around her, the sounds amplified in the confined space. "Status report," she called out, her voice echoing in the darkness. "Engines offline, Captain," the comm officer's voice was shaky. "Life support systems failing. We're venting atmosphere." Eva's stomach churned. They were trapped, their ship dying around them. She fumbled for her emergency flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. "Everyone, stay calm," she said, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "We'll find a way out of this." She shone the light around the bridge, her heart sinking as she took in the damage. Consoles were shattered, wires sparking, and the air was thick with a metallic tang of blood. Several crew members lay injured, their groans filling the silence. Alex, his face pale and streaked with blood, crawled towards her. "Captain, we have to get out of here," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. Eva nodded, her mind racing. They couldn't stay here and die. They had to find a way to escape, to warn the rest of humanity about this threat. "Dr. Liu, any readings on the alien ship?" she asked, her voice urgent. It's alive, Captain." Dr. Liu's voice was filled with awe and terror. "The entire ship is a single organism. It's digesting us." The words hung in the air, a horrifying realization. They weren't just trapped, they were being consumed. Eva felt a surge of defiance. They wouldn't go down without a fight. "We need to find a way to the ship's core," she said, her voice firm. "If we can disrupt its systems, we might be able to break free." She turned to her crew, their faces illuminated by the dim flashlight. "We're not giving up. We're going to fight our way out of this." A spark of determination flickered in their eyes. They were soldiers, scientists, explorers. They were human, and they would not surrender. The Intrepid was no longer a ship, but a tomb. Its metal carcass creaked and groaned under the pressure of the alien vessel's digestive processes. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid smell of burning insulation. Eva led her surviving crew members through the darkened corridors, their flashlights casting dancing shadows on the walls. The once familiar passages were now warped and twisted, the ship's internal structure contorting under the alien organism's influence. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence. Every creak and groan of the ship sent shivers down their spines. They were deep within the belly of the beast, and they could feel its hunger. "The ship's internal sensors are scrambled," Dr. Liu reported, his voice strained. "We're flying blind." "Then we'll have to rely on our instincts," Eva said, her voice firm. "We need to find a way to the core. That's our only chance." They pressed on, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The ship's interior was a labyrinth of organic tunnels, pulsating with an eerie life of its own. The walls seemed to breathe, the floors shifted beneath their feet, and the air was thick with unknown scents. Alex, his face pale but determined, kept close to Eva. "Do you think we can find a way out?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Eva met his gaze, her own eyes reflecting the dim light of the flashlights. "We have to," she said, "for everyone back home." They rounded a corner and stumbled into a chamber unlike any they had seen before. The walls were lined with strange, bioluminescent pods, each one pulsating with an otherworldly glow. Within the pods, they could see the shadowy outlines of creatures, their forms twisted and alien. "What are those?" Turner's voice was hushed, filled with a mixture of fear and fascination. "I don't know," Dr. Liu admitted, his eyes wide. "But they're not human." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The pods were a chilling reminder of the alien ship's true nature. They were intruders in a realm beyond their understanding, and the creatures within those pods reminded them of the dangers that lurked in the darkness. Suddenly, one of the pods ruptured, spilling its contents onto the floor. A grotesque, insectoid creature emerged, its chitinous exoskeleton glistening in the dim light. It let out a piercing shriek, its multiple eyes fixated on the terrified crew. "Open fire!" Eva shouted, raising her sidearm. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of gunfire. The creature twitched and convulsed, its alien blood splattering the walls. But more pods were rupturing, releasing a swarm of the monstrous beings. The crew fought back desperately, their laser blast illuminating the chamber in a strobe-like dance of light and shadow. But the creatures were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. Eva felt a sharp pain in her shoulder as a claw raked across her flesh. She stumbled back, firing blindly into the swarm. They were losing. The creatures were closing in, their chittering cries filling the air. Eva knew they couldn't hold out much longer. They were going to die here, in the belly of the beast. And then a new sound echoed through the chamber. A low, guttural growl, like a predator sensing its prey. The creatures froze, their chittering cries replaced by an eerie silence. They turned their multiple eyes toward the source of the sound, their bodies trembling. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form shrouded in darkness. It was massive, towering over the insectoid creatures. Its eyes glowed with an intense, predatory hunger. The alien ship had awakened, and it was not happy. The insectoid creatures recoiled, their chittering cries turning into high-pitched squeals of terror. They scurried away from the newcomer, their multiple limbs scrambling for purchase on the slick, organic floor. Even the wounded crew members, their bodies racked with pain, managed to crawl away, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. The figure stepped fully into the chamber's dim light, its form a grotesque parody of both machine and beast. Its body was a patchwork of metallic plates and sinewy muscle, its limbs ending in claws that dripped with a viscous, luminescent fluid. Its head was a mass of sensory organs, dominated by a single, cyclopean eye that burned with a cold, predatory intelligence. Eva's breath hitched in her throat. This wasn't just another guardian, this was something else entirely. Something ancient, powerful, and utterly alien. The creature surveyed the scene, its gaze sweeping across the terrified humans and the cowering insectoids. A low growl rumbled from its chest, the sound vibrating through the chamber, rattling Eva's bones. Then it spoke. Its voice was a guttural rasp, echoing through the chamber like the grinding of tectonic plates. "Intruders," it hissed, its single eye fixing on Eva. "You dare disturb my slumber?" Eva's breath hitched. The creature's voice, a guttural rasp that seemed to emanate from the depths of the ship itself, sent shivers down her spine. She tightened her grip on her sidearm, its reassuring weight a small comfort in the face of this overwhelming presence. We mean no harm," she managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. "We were merely exploring." The creature's single eye narrowed, its gaze piercing through Eva as if searching for the truth in her words. The air crackled with tension, the silence punctuated only by the soft whimpers of the wounded crew members and the skittering of the insectoid creatures huddled in the corners of the chamber. "Exploring?" The creature's voice dripped with disdain. "This vessel is not yours to explore. You are trespassers, and you will be punished." Despair washed over Eva. They were at the mercy of this creature, their fate hanging by a thread. She glanced at her crew, their faces a mask of fear and hopelessness. She had to find a way to protect them, to buy them time. We are willing to leave," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We apologize for any intrusion." The creature let out a low, rumbling laugh that shook the chamber. "Leave? You cannot leave. You have disturbed my slumber, and now you will pay the price." Its claws twitched, and the insectoid creatures stirred, their multiple eyes gleaming with anticipation. Eva's heart sank. They were about to be torn apart. But then Dr. Liu stepped forward, his voice surprisingly steady. "Wait," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We have something that might interest you." The creature's eye narrowed, its attention shifting to the scientist. "What could you possibly offer that would be of value to me?" it hissed. Dr. Liu swallowed hard, his gaze unwavering. "Knowledge," he said. "We know about the galaxy, of other civilizations, of the events that have transpired in your absence." The creature was silent for a moment, its eye unblinking. Then it tilted its head slightly, a gesture that Eva interpreted as curiosity. "Knowledge," it repeated, its voice a low rumble. "Very well. Speak. Tell me what you know." A flicker of hope ignited in Eva's chest. Perhaps there was a chance, a slim possibility that they could reason with this creature. She looked at Dr. Liu, her eyes filled with a silent plea. The fate of the Intrepid and its crew now rested on the shoulders of the scientist. Dr. Liu took a deep breath, the stale air heavy in his lungs. He met the creature's gaze, his own eyes steady despite the fear that gnawed at him. "Your ship," he began, his voice surprisingly clear. "It's remarkable. The technology, the bio-organic integration. It's far beyond anything we've ever encountered." The creature's single eye pulsed with a dim red light. "It is ancient," it rumbled, its voice echoing through the chamber. "From a time before your kind even walked upright." Eva watched the exchange, her heart pounding in her chest. Could Liu roll this off? Could they talk their way out of this nightmare? "We've been studying the ship," Liu continued, "trying to understand its systems, its purpose." The creature's head tilted slightly, a gesture that seemed almost inquisitive. "And what have you learned?" "We believe your ship is sentient," Liu said, choosing his words carefully. "A living entity, capable of thought and action." A low growl rumbled from the creature's chest. "You are perceptive, human. But what of it?" "We're explorers," Liu said, his voice steady. "We seek knowledge, understanding. We want to learn from you, from your people." The creature was silent for a long moment, the only sound the soft dripping of the alien fluid from its claws. Then it spoke, its voice a raspy whisper. "My people are gone," it said, a hint of sorrow in its tone. "Extinct. Wiped out by a conflict that consumed the galaxy." Eva's breath caught in her throat. The creature's words painted a bleak picture, a chilling reminder of the fragility of civilizations. We're sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The creature's eye flickered. "Your sympathy is meaningless, but your knowledge, that is something I desire. Tell me of this galaxy, of the civilizations that now inhabit it. Tell me of the conflict that destroyed my people." A spark of hope ignited in Eva's chest. This wasn't just a monster. It was a survivor, a relic of a bygone era seeking answers in the present. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could find common ground. "We'll tell you everything we know," she said, her voice firm. "But first, let my crew go. They're innocent in this." The creature's eyes narrowed. "Innocent?" it hissed. "They trespassed on my vessel, disturbed my slumber. They will face the consequences of their actions." The insectoid creatures stirred, their chittering growing louder. Eva's hand tightened on her sidearm. They had come so far, only to be faced with another impossible choice. "Then let me stay," Dr. Liu said, stepping forward. "I'll be your guide, your translator. I'll share everything we know. But let my crew go." The creature considered Liu's offer, its eye glowing with an unsettling intensity. Then it nodded slowly. Very well, it rumbled. Your crew may leave, but you, human, will remain, and if your knowledge proves unsatisfactory, you will share their fate. A heavy silence descended upon the chamber. Eva's eyes met Liu's, and conflicting emotions washed over her. Gratitude for his sacrifice warred with the guilt of leaving him behind. She wanted to protest, to refuse his offer, but she knew it was their only chance. Liu, she began, her voice thick with emotion, you don't have to do this. Liu offered a weak smile, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. Someone has to, Captain, and I'm the best equipped to handle this situation. Alex stepped forward, his young face etched with worry. But what if? He trailed off, unable to voice the fear that hung heavy in the air. I'll be fine, Liu reassured him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. Just get back to Earth. Warn them. Tell them what we found. Eva nodded, her throat tight. We will, and we'll come back for you, Liu. I promise. The creature shifted impatiently, its claws scraping against the organic floor. Enough sentimentality, it growled. It is time. With heavy hearts, the crew gathered their wounded and prepared to leave. They cast one last look at Liu, his slender figure standing alone in the eerie chamber, a lone beacon of humanity in the heart of the alien ship. The creature gestured towards a pulsating tunnel that snaked away into the darkness. This will lead you back to your vessel, it said. Go, and do not return. Eva swallowed hard, her hand lingering on Liu's shoulder. Good luck, Doctor, she whispered. Liu nodded, his eyes filled with a resolve that belied his fear. You too, Captain. The crew turned and entered the tunnel, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The tunnel pulsed with an eerie rhythm, the walls thrumming with the ship's alien life force. The air was thick and cloying, carrying the faint scent of decay and something else, something undefinable that sent shivers down Eva's spine. The crew moved in silence, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, their footsteps muffled by the spongy floor. Alex, his youthful face etched with worry, glanced back at the receding chamber. Do you think he'll be all right? He whispered, his voice barely audible above the ship's organic hum. Eva's throat tightened. I don't know, Alex, she admitted, her voice heavy with guilt. But we have to trust him. He's our best chance. They pressed on, the tunnel twisting and turning, leading them deeper into the ship's depths. The bioluminescent pods lining the walls cast an eerie glow, illuminating the grotesque forms of the creatures within. Some were still, their bodies limp and lifeless, while others twitched and writhed, their multiple eyes following the crew's every move. The silence was broken by a sudden, sharp crack. The floor beneath them gave way, sending them tumbling into a dark abyss. Eva cried out as she fell, her flashlight spinning away into the darkness. She landed hard, the impact jarring her injured leg. Everyone all right? She called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. I think so, Turner's voice came from somewhere in the darkness. But my flashlight's busted. Eva fumbled for her flashlight, its beam weak and flickering. She scanned the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. They were in a massive chamber, its walls and ceiling lost in shadow. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and a low, guttural growl echoed from somewhere in the depths. What was that? Alex's voice was a shaky whisper. Eva swallowed hard. I don't know, she admitted, but we need to keep moving. We can't stay here. They stumbled forward, their flashlights casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The growling grew louder and closer. Eva's grip tightened on her sidearm. They were being hunted. Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes pierced the darkness, followed by the sinuous form of a creature slithering towards them. It was serpentine, its scales shimmering with an iridescent sheen. Its fangs dripped with venom, and its eyes burned with a predatory hunger. Eva raised her sidearm, her finger tightening on the trigger. But before she could fire, the creature lunged, its body a blur of motion. The serpentine creature struck with lightning speed. Its fangs grazed Eva's arm, tearing through her uniform and leaving a shallow gash. She cried out in pain, stumbling backward. "Get it off me," she shouted, her voice laced with panic. Alex reacted instantly, his laser pistol blazing. The beam struck the creature's flank, causing it to recoil with a hiss. It turned its attention to Alex, its eyes burning with rage. "Turner, Khan, find cover," Eva yelled, firing her weapon at the creature. The laser blast seemed to have little effect, glancing off its shimmering scales. The chamber echoed with the sounds of gunfire and the creature's enraged hisses. The air was thick with the smell of burnt flesh and ozone. The crew fought back desperately, but the creature was too fast, too agile. Dr. Liu, his hands shaking, pressed a bandage against Eva's wound. "We have to get out of here, Captain," he said urgently. "We're no match for this thing." Eva gritted her teeth, her vision blurring with pain. "We can't just run," she said, her voice hoarse. "We have to find a way to fight back." Alex, his face grim, ducked behind a cluster of bioluminescent pods. "We're out of options, Captain," he shouted over the din of battle. "Our weapons are useless." Eva's heart sank. He was right. They were trapped, their backs against the wall, with no way to defend themselves. Suddenly, Turner's voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, look!" he yelled, pointing towards the ceiling. Eva followed his gaze and saw a glimmer of light filtering through a crack in the chamber's ceiling. A way out. "We have to get up there," she said, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. "That's our only chance." But how? The ceiling was high, the walls slick with organic matter. They had no way to climb. "The pods," Dr. Liu shouted, his eyes wide with excitement. They're reacting to the creature's presence. Maybe we can use them." Eva's eyes darted to the bioluminescent pods lining the walls. They were indeed pulsating more rapidly, their glow intensifying with each passing moment. "Khan, Turner, can you rig one of these pods to explode?" she asked, her voice filled with desperate hope. The two engineers exchanged a look, then nodded in unison. "We can try," Turner said, his voice grim, "but it'll be risky." "We don't have a choice," Eva said. "Do it." As Turner and Khan worked frantically on one of the pods, the rest of the crew redoubled their efforts to hold off the creature. Laser blast and desperate shouts filled the chamber, the air thick with the stench of fear and adrenaline. The creature lunged again, its claws tearing through the air, narrowly missing Alex. He stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hurry!" Eva shouted, firing her sidearm at the creature. Just as the creature was about to strike again, a blinding flash of light erupted from one of the pods. The chamber shook violently, the walls rippling like a disturbed pond. The creature roared in pain, its body momentarily stunned. "Now!" Eva yelled. The crew scrambled towards the newly formed opening in the ceiling, their boots slipping on the slick floor. They pulled themselves up, one by one, their hands scrabbling for purchase on the uneven surface. Eva was the last one out. As she hauled herself up, she glanced back at the chamber. The creature was regaining its senses. It lunged towards the opening, its claws scraping against the edges. Eva kicked out, her boot connecting with the creature's snout. It recoiled with a snarl, its eye burning with hatred. "Let's go," she shouted, pulling herself through the opening. They crawled through a narrow tunnel, the bioluminescent glow of the chamber fading behind them. They were in another part of the ship now, deeper, darker. But for now, they were safe. Eva collapsed onto the floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. They had survived, but for how long? The creature's jaws snapped shut inches from Eva's boots. She felt a rush of air as it narrowly missed its target. Adrenaline surged through her veins, momentarily masking the pain in her leg. "Keep going," she urged the others, scrambling through the narrow tunnel. Behind them, the creature's enraged hiss echoed through the chamber. They could hear its claws scraping against the walls, and its frustration. The tunnel twisted and turned, its bioluminescent walls casting an eerie green glow. The air was thick and humid, the stench of decay clinging to their clothes. Eva's breath came in ragged gasps, her injured leg throbbing with every step. They emerged into another chamber, this one smaller and less ominous. The walls were lined with shelves filled with strange, organic objects, their purpose unknown. A single, pulsating orb hung from the ceiling, casting a soft, blue light. "What is this place?" Alex asked, his voice hushed. Dr. Liu, despite his exhaustion, couldn't contain his curiosity. He approached one of the shelves, carefully examining the objects. "It looks like some kind of laboratory or storage area," he said, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns on one of the objects. These are biological samples, preserved tissue, organs, even entire creatures." Nausea washed over Eva. The alien ship was not just a vessel, it was a macabre museum. Its creators had inflicted on countless worlds. "We need to keep moving," she said, her voice firm. "We can't let this distract us." They continued their journey, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The ship's organic hum was a constant reminder of their precarious situation. They were deep within its belly, and they had no idea what other dangers awaited them. As they ventured further, the tunnels grew narrower, forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees. The air grew thicker, the stench of decay more pronounced. Eva's wound throbbed, and she could feel her strength waning. They rounded a bend and stumbled into a dead end. The tunnel terminated in a solid wall of pulsating flesh. "No." Alex's voice was filled with despair. "We're trapped." Eva's heart sank. They had come so far, only to be cornered once again. The creature's growls echoed in the distance, growing closer with each passing moment. "There has to be another way," Dr. Liu insisted, his voice frantic. "There has to be." He ran his hands along the wall, searching for a hidden passage, a weakness. But the flesh was solid, unyielding. The growls grew louder and closer. The creature was almost upon them. And then Dr. Liu's fingers brushed against something. A hidden seam, a subtle shift in the texture of the wall. He pressed against it, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper into the ship. "This way," he shouted, his voice filled with desperate hope. They scrambled through the opening, the creature's roars echoing behind them. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for them to crawl through a single file. The bioluminescent walls pulsed with a dim, rhythmic light, casting long, eerie shadows that danced and twisted in the confined space. The air was heavy, the stench of decay even more pronounced than before. Eva led the way, her injured leg protesting with every movement. The pain was a constant throb, a reminder of their vulnerability. But she pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. They had to keep moving, had to find a way out of this nightmare. Behind her, she could hear the labored breathing of her crew, their bodies bruised and battered from the earlier encounters. Alex, ever the optimist, tried to keep their spirits up with a few whispered jokes, but the humor felt forced, a thin veneer over the fear that gnawed at them all. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning, leading them deeper into the ship's labyrinthine depths. Eva's flashlight beam danced across the walls, revealing strange symbols and intricate patterns etched into the organic surface. They were alien, indecipherable. "Do you think this ship, is conscious?" Turner's voice was barely a whisper, his words echoing in the confined space. Dr. Liu, his face drawn and pale, nodded slowly. "It's possible," he said. "The level of bio-organic integration we've observed suggests a level of sentience far beyond anything we've encountered before." "So it's like a giant animal?" Alex asked, his voice tinged with awe and fear. "More like a god," Dr. Liu replied, his voice hushed. "An ancient, powerful being slumbering in the void." Eva shivered, not from the cold, but from the sheer enormity of the realization. They were trapped inside a living god, a relic of a civilization that had mastered the very fabric of existence. The thought was both humbling and terrifying. They continued their crawl, the silence broken only by the soft squelching of their boots on the organic floor and the occasional muffled cough from one of the wounded. The air grew heavier, the stench of decay more pungent. Eva's stomach churned, and she fought back the urge to vomit. Suddenly, the tunnel opened up into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. The bioluminescent walls cast a dim, ethereal glow, revealing a sight that stole the breath from their lungs. In the center of the chamber, suspended in mid-air, was a massive, pulsating sphere. It throbbed with an otherworldly light, its surface covered in intricate, glowing patterns. It was the heart of the ship, the source of its power, its life. And it was dying. The sight of the dying core was both mesmerizing and terrifying. The pulsating sphere, once a source of immense power, now flickered weakly, its light fading with every beat. The intricate patterns on its surface grew dim like embers slowly dying out. Eva stared at it, a sense of awe mingled with a profound sadness. This ship, this living being, was dying, and they were trapped inside it. "It's beautiful," Alex whispered, his voice filled with a strange reverence. Dr. Liu nodded, his eyes fixed on the core. "It's also dying," he said, his voice grave. "The ship's life force is fading." Turner, the engineer, frowned. Can we do anything to help it?" Liu shook his head. "I don't think so. The damage is too extensive. It's beyond our capabilities." A heavy silence fell over the group. The realization that they were trapped inside a dying creature, a dying god, weighed heavily on their hearts. Eva cleared her throat, breaking the silence. "We need to find a way out," she said, her voice firm, "before it's too late." "But where do we go?" Alex asked, his voice laced with desperation. "We're lost in this maze." "We keep moving," Eva said, her determination unwavering. "We have to believe there's a way out." They turned away from the dying core, their flashlights illuminating the path ahead. The tunnels seemed to twist and turn endlessly, leading them deeper into the ship's labyrinthine depths. As they walked, the ship's organic hum grew fainter, its heartbeat slowing with each passing moment. The air grew colder, the stench of decay stronger. The crew huddled closer together, their bodies shivering not just from the cold, but from the encroaching fear. They rounded a corner and stumbled into a chamber filled with rows upon rows of stasis pods. The pods were similar to the ones they had encountered earlier, but these were larger and more elaborate, and within them they could see the shadowy outlines of humanoid figures, their forms suspended in a state of suspended animation. Eva's heart skipped a beat. "Are those people?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dr. Liu approached one of the pods, his flashlight illuminating the figure within. It was a woman, her features delicate and serene. She looked human, but there was something different about her. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were closed, their lids adorned with intricate, glowing markings. "She's not like us," Liu said, his voice hushed. "But she's definitely humanoid, and she's alive." Eva felt a surge of hope. Perhaps these beings, whoever they were, could help them. Perhaps they held the key to escaping this dying ship and warning humanity about the threat it posed. "We need to find a way to wake her up," she said, her voice filled with a newfound determination. "She might be our only hope." Eva approached the nearest pod, her flashlight beam tracing the contours of the woman's serene face. The glowing markings on her eyelids pulsed faintly, like distant stars caught in a nebula. Can we open it?" Alex asked, his voice hushed with a mix of awe and trepidation. Dr. Liu examined the pod's control panel, his fingers tracing the alien symbols. "It appears to be bio-locked," he said, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It might require a DNA sample to open." Eva's gaze swept across her crew. "Any volunteers?" Turner stepped forward, his youthful bravado momentarily overshadowing his fear. "I'll do it, Captain," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Are you sure?" Eva asked, concern etched on her face. Turner nodded. "Someone has to, and we're running out of time." He pressed his palm against the scanner, the panel glowing briefly before a soft hiss signaled the pod's release. The lid slid open, revealing the woman within. She lay motionless, her chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her hair, a cascade of silver, framed her delicate features. She looked like a porcelain doll, frozen in time. Is she alive?" Alex whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Dr. Liu leaned closer, checking her vitals. "She's in some kind of stasis," he said. "Her life functions are minimal, but she's definitely alive." "Can you wake her up?" Eva asked, her voice urgent. Liu hesitated. "I don't know. The technology is far beyond anything we've encountered. It could be dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Eva said, her voice firm. "We need answers." Liu nodded, his face grim. He began to work on the pod's control panel, his fingers dancing across the alien symbols. The crew watched in silence, their hopes and fears intertwined. Suddenly, the pod's interior lit up, bathing the woman in a soft, white light. Her eyelids fluttered, and she slowly opened her eyes, revealing orbs of pure, shimmering gold. The crew gasped, their flashlights momentarily forgotten. The woman's gaze swept across them, taking in their tattered uniforms and weary faces. A flicker of surprise crossed her features, followed by a deep sadness. "Humans," she whispered, her voice a haunting melody. "After all this time." The woman's voice, a haunting melody in the silence of the chamber, sent a shiver down Eva's spine. Her golden eyes held an ancient wisdom, a depth that spoke of eons of existence. "Who are you?" Eva asked, her voice barely a whisper. The woman slowly sat up, her movements fluid and graceful despite the long stasis. She looked at each of them in turn, her gaze lingering on Eva. "I am Anya," she said, her voice soft yet carrying an undeniable authority. "Guardian of this vessel, and once, long ago, human." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. A human? On this alien ship? The revelation was both shocking and exhilarating. It was a lifeline, a connection to a past they thought lost forever. "How is that possible?" Dr. Liu asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Humans haven't ventured this far into space for centuries." Anya's lips curled into a sad smile. "Time flows differently here," she said, her gaze distant. "Eons have passed since I last walked among your kind. But the memory of Earth, of humanity, it never fades." Tears welled up in Eva's eyes. This woman, this ancient ancestor, was a bridge between their past and their present. "We need your help," Eva said, her voice thick with emotion. "We're trapped, and this ship, it's dying." Anya's golden eyes clouded with sorrow. "I know," she said. "I have felt its pain, its slow decline. But there is little I can do. My power is tied to the ship, and it is fading with each passing moment." Despair threatened to overwhelm Eva, but she pushed it back. "There must be something we can do," she insisted. "A way to escape, to warn our people." Anya looked at her, a flicker of something akin to hope in her eyes. "There is a way," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "A way to harness the ship's remaining power, to unleash its true potential." Eva's heart leaped. "How?" she asked, her voice urgent. Anya's gaze turned towards the dying core, its light fading with every pulse. "The ship's essence," she said, "it holds the key. But it is a dangerous path, one fraught with risk." Eva met her gaze, her own eyes filled with determination. "We're willing to take that risk," she said, "for humanity's sake." Anya nodded slowly. "Then follow me," she said, her voice resolute. "I will show you the way." She led them deeper into the ship, her footsteps echoing in the silent corridors. The air grew colder, the ship's heartbeat growing fainter with each step. But Eva felt a sense of purpose, a renewed hope that they might yet survive this ordeal. They were venturing into the unknown, guided by a ghost from the past. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. Anya's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a forgotten past. Humans, after all this time. Eva's mind reeled. A human, preserved for countless years within this alien vessel. It was a revelation that defied comprehension, a glimmer of hope in the face of overwhelming despair. But Anya's sadness, her admission of fading power, tempered that hope with a chilling reality. Time was running out, not just for them, but for the ship itself. "Show us," Eva said, her voice firm, her gaze locked with Anya's. "Show us the way." Anya nodded, a flicker of determination in her ancient eyes. She turned and led them deeper into the ship, her footsteps silent on the organic floor. The tunnels grew narrower, the air denser, the bioluminescent glow casting an eerie pallor on their faces. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic pulsing of the ship's dying heart, a slow, mournful drumbeat that echoed through the corridors. Eva felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. They were walking deeper into the unknown, guided by a ghost from the past, their fate uncertain. They reached a chamber unlike any they had seen before. The walls were smooth and metallic, devoid of the organic growths that characterized the rest of the ship. In the center of the chamber, a massive, crystalline structure rose from the floor, its surface etched with intricate symbols and patterns. Anya paused, her hand resting on the cool metal of the wall. "This is the heart of the ship," she said, her voice hushed. "The repository of its knowledge, its power." Eva's breath caught in her throat. The crystalline structure pulsed with a faint light, its energy ebbing with each beat. It was a dying star, a fading beacon of a once great civilization. "How do we harness its power?" Dr. Liu asked, his voice filled with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Anya turned to him, her golden eyes filled with a solemn light. "It will require a sacrifice," she said, "a sacrifice of one of your own." A cold silence fell over the chamber. The crew exchanged horrified glances, the weight of Anya's words hanging heavy in the air. A human sacrifice. The concept was abhorrent, a violation of everything they stood for. Eva's stomach churned. She couldn't fathom sacrificing one of her own, not even to save the rest. But the alternative was equally unthinkable: to remain trapped within this dying ship, their fate sealed along with its own. "There must be another way," she said, her voice strained. "We can't just sacrifice someone." Anya's gaze remained fixed on the crystalline core, her expression unreadable. "There is no other way," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The ship's essence requires a human life force to ignite its final spark." Alex stepped forward, his face pale. "I'll do it," he volunteered, his voice surprisingly steady. "I'm the youngest. I have the least to lose." Eva's heart ached. She reached out, her hand resting on his shoulder. "No, Alex," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "We won't let you do that." Turner cleared his throat, his gaze averted. "Captain, maybe it's the only way. We have to consider the bigger picture. Humanity's fate." Eva shook her head, her resolve hardening. "No," she repeated, her voice rising. "We will not sacrifice one of our own. We will find another way." Dr. Liu stepped forward, his eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "Captain," he said gently, "perhaps Anya knows something we don't. Perhaps there's a way to minimize the sacrifice." Anya turned to him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "There is," she admitted, "but it is a risky path, one that could lead to even greater loss." Eva's curiosity was piqued. "Tell us," she urged. "We need to know all our options." Anya hesitated, her gaze returning to the dying core. "The ship's essence," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "It contains the memories, the experiences of countless beings who have merged with it over the eons. If one of you were to connect with the essence, to become part of the ship, it might be enough to trigger its final surge of power." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of merging with the alien ship, of becoming one with its consciousness, was both terrifying and alluring. And what would happen to the person who merges with it? Eva asked, her voice trembling. Anya's eyes filled with sorrow. "They would cease to exist as an individual," she said. "Their consciousness would become part of the ship's, their memories and experiences woven into its tapestry." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The crew grappled with the implications of Anya's words, each one wrestling with their fears and doubts. The choice was clear: sacrifice one to save the many or risk the extinction of their entire species. Eva looked at her crew, their faces etched with the weight of the decision they had to make. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm. "We need to decide what we're going to do." The crew retreated to a corner of the chamber, their flashlights casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The silence was thick, heavy with the weight of their impossible choice. Eva sat on the cold, metal floor, her injured leg throbbing. She looked at her crew, their faces etched with a mixture of fear, sadness, and resolve. They were all heroes, each one willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. But she couldn't ask that of them. She couldn't be the one to make that choice. "We can't do it," she said, her voice hoarse. "We can't sacrifice one of our own." Alex knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "But Captain, what other choice do we have? If we don't, we'll all die here. And Earth, they won't even know what hit them." Eva closed her eyes, the image of her family flashing before her. Her husband, her 2 young daughters. She couldn't bear the thought of them facing the same fate as the countless civilizations that had fallen before the alien threat. "I know," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "But it's not right. It's not human." Dr. Liu sat down beside her, his face lined with exhaustion. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the hardest choices are the ones that test our humanity the most." Turner paced back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back. "We're scientists, explorers," he said, his voice rising. "We're supposed to find solutions, not sacrifices." Khan, the quietest of the group, finally spoke up. "But what if there's no other solution?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if this is the only way to save our people?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The crew sat in silence, each one lost in their thoughts, their fears. Eva looked at each of them in turn, her heart aching. They were so young, so full of life. They deserved a future, a chance to go home. "I won't ask any of you to make this sacrifice," she said, her voice firm. "But if one of you chooses to, I won't stop you." Tears welled up in Alex's eyes. He reached out, taking Eva's hand in his. "Captain," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "you've always taught us to put the mission first, to do what's necessary, no matter the cost." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his crewmates. "I volunteer," he said, his voice clear and resolute. "I'll do it." Eva's heart lurched. She stared at Alex, his young face set in a grim determination that belied his years. "Alex, no," she said, her voice cracking. "I can't let you do this." He met her gaze, his eyes shining with a newfound maturity. "It's my choice, Captain," he said softly. "I'm ready." Turner and Khan exchanged a look, their faces a mixture of admiration and sorrow. Dr. Liu lowered his head, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Eva reached out, her hand trembling as she cupped Alex's cheek. "You're just a kid," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You haven't even lived yet." Alex leaned into her touch, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "I've seen enough, Captain," he said, his voice barely audible. "I've seen what they did to our people, to my family. I won't let them do it again." He pulled away, his gaze resolute. "I'm ready," he repeated, stepping towards the crystalline core. Anya watched the exchange, her ancient eyes filled with a profound sadness. She had witnessed countless acts of sacrifice throughout her long existence, but this one cut deep. It was the sacrifice of youth, of potential, of a future yet to be lived. "Come," she said, her voice gentle. "Let us finish this." Alex approached the core, its fading light casting an ethereal glow on his face. He reached out, his hand hovering over its surface. Eva watched, her heart breaking. She wanted to stop him, to scream, to plead. But she knew it was too late. Alex had made his choice, and she had to respect it. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then, with a final act of courage, pressed his palm against the core. A blinding flash of light erupted, filling the chamber. The ship shuddered, its organic walls convulsing. Energy surged through the corridors, a primal scream echoing through the void. And then, silence. The light faded, revealing Alex's lifeless form, his hand still pressed against the core. His face was serene, a peaceful smile gracing his lips. Eva's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. The others gathered around her, their own grief mingling with a newfound determination. The ship's engines roared to life, its power restored. The Intrepid shuddered, breaking free from the alien vessel's grasp. They were free. But the cost of their freedom was etched in their hearts, a wound that would never fully heal. As the Intrepid hurtled through the darkness, Eva looked back at the alien ship, its form shrinking in the distance. She thought of Alex, of his sacrifice, of the countless others who had given their lives in the war against the Galactic Council. Anger washed over her, a burning rage that fueled her determination. They would not let Alex's death be in vain. They would warn Earth, they would prepare for the coming storm. And they would fight back. The news of the Intrepid's return sent shockwaves across the globe. The battered scout ship, its hull scarred and pitted, limped into Earth's orbit, a grim reminder of the horrors that awaited humanity in the depths of space. In the metropolis of New Mumbai, the news feeds blared the story, their holographic projections casting a somber pall over the crowded streets. People huddled together, their faces etched with fear and disbelief. A young woman, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, clutched a datapad, her gaze fixed on the image of the Intrepid. It was Lieutenant Turner's mother, Sarah. Her son, her only child, was among the missing. "He's gone," she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. "They're all gone." A stranger, a kind-faced older woman, reached out and squeezed her shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice gentle. "They were heroes. They gave their lives for us." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. She knew her son had died a hero, but the knowledge did little to ease the pain of his loss. In the heart of Geneva, the headquarters of the United Earth Government, the mood was equally somber. President Eleanor Vance sat at her desk, her fingers steepled in front of her. The report from the Intrepid's surviving crew lay open before her. The Galactic Council, an alliance of advanced alien civilizations, had demanded an impossible tribute. Failure to comply would result in the annihilation of Earth. And now, the Intrepid's encounter with the living ship had revealed a terrifying truth. The Council was not alone in its power. There were other forces at play in the galaxy, ancient and enigmatic, their intentions unknown. Eleanor's advisors sat around the table, their faces grim. General Zhang, the head of Earth's defense forces, drummed his fingers on the polished surface. "We can't meet their demands," he said, his voice gruff. "It would cripple us, leave us defenseless." Dr. Anya Petrova, the lead scientist on the Intrepid mission, shook her head. "And even if we could," she said, her voice weary, "it wouldn't be enough. The Council wants to break us, to humiliate us. They want us to kneel." Eleanor sighed, the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. She looked at each of her advisors in turn, their faces a mirror of her own anxieties. "We have to find another way," she said, her voice firm. "We will not surrender. We will not let them dictate our fate." But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at her. Humanity was still reeling from the war, its resources depleted, its spirit battered. How could they possibly stand against the might of the Galactic Council, let alone the mysterious forces lurking in the shadows of space? The answer, she knew, lay somewhere in the depths of the Intrepid's data logs, in the secrets of the alien ship. But unlocking those secrets would require time, resources, and a courage that few possessed. The future of humanity hung in the balance. In the research complex beneath the Tycho crater on Luna, Dr. Masako Nakamura, a leading expert in xenobiology, sat hunched over her terminal, her eyes glued to the data streaming in from Earth. The Intrepid's logs, a chaotic jumble of sensor readings, video feeds, and frantic communications, painted a picture both terrifying and exhilarating. Masako's fingers flew across the keyboard, her mind racing to process the information. The alien ship, the creatures, the living power source. It was a treasure trove of scientific discovery, a glimpse into a realm beyond human comprehension. But it was also a stark reminder of their vulnerability. The Galactic Council's ultimatum hung heavy in the air, a constant threat looming over their every move. "Dr. Nakamura," a voice crackled over the comm, interrupting her thoughts. It was Dr. Thomas Harper, the head of the research facility. "The President has requested your presence in the main conference room. Immediately." Masako's heart skipped a beat. The President. This was bigger than she had imagined. She quickly gathered her notes, her mind buzzing with possibilities. The main conference room was a stark contrast to the dimly lit labs and sterile corridors of the research facility. Sunlight streamed through the panoramic windows, offering a breathtaking view of Earth, a blue marble suspended in the blackness of space. President Vance stood at the head of the table, her face etched with a combination of grief and determination. Around her sat a group of scientists, military leaders, and politicians, their expressions mirroring the gravity of the situation. "Dr. Nakamura," the President greeted her, her voice warm but firm. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Masako nodded, taking her seat at the table. "It's an honor, Madam President." "We've all reviewed the Intrepid's logs," Vance continued, her gaze sweeping across the room. "And I think it's safe to say that we're all in agreement. The situation is dire." A murmur of assent rippled through the room. The scientists exchanged worried glances, and the military leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "But we're not giving up," Vance's voice rose, cutting through the tension. "We will not bow to the Council's demands. We will find a way to fight back." Defiance ignited in Masako's chest. The President's words echoed the sentiment she had felt while poring over the Intrepid's data. Humanity was not defeated. Not yet. "The alien ship," she said, her voice clear and confident. "It holds the key. The technology, the power source. It's far beyond anything we've ever imagined. If we can understand it, replicate it, we might have a chance." The room fell silent, every eye on her. She could feel the weight of their expectations, the hope rising in their gazes. "It won't be easy," she continued, her voice steady. "But it's our only hope. We have to try." The scientist nodded. President Vance smiled, a sense of resolve replacing the grief in her eyes. "Then let's get to work," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "The fate of humanity rests on our shoulders." President Vance's words echoed in the silence that followed, a stark contrast to the murmurs of despair that had filled the room moments before. The panoramic window behind her framed the Earth, a fragile blue marble hanging in the vastness of space. It was a poignant reminder of what was at stake. Masako's gaze drifted to the window, her thoughts heavy with the burden of responsibility. She had dedicated her life to the pursuit of knowledge, and to unraveling the mysteries of the universe. But now, that pursuit had taken on a new urgency, a desperate race against time. The meeting dissolved into a flurry of activity. Scientists huddled together, their voices low and intense as they debated the feasibility of Masako's proposal. Military leaders conferred in hushed tones, their faces etched with a grim determination. Politicians argued and strategized, their voices rising and falling in a symphony of conflicting opinions. Masako found herself drawn to the window, the Earth's serene beauty a stark contrast to the turmoil within the conference room. She thought of her family, her friends, the billions of lives that depended on their success. The weight of it all threatened to crush her. "Dr. Nakamura." Masako turned to see President Vance approaching, her expression a mixture of concern and empathy. "Are you all right?" Vance asked, her voice soft. Masako forced a smile. "Just overwhelmed, Madam President. The scale of this, it's daunting." Vance nodded, her gaze returning to the Earth. "It is," she agreed, "but we cannot afford to falter. The fate of our species rests on our ability to rise to this challenge." She paused, her eyes searching Masako's. "I believe in you, Doctor. I believe in your team. You are our best hope." Masako felt a surge of emotion, a mix of gratitude and determination. The president's faith in humanity, was a beacon in the darkness. "We won't let you down, Madam President," she said, her voice firm. "We'll find a way." Vance smiled, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "I know you will," she said. "Now, go. Make history." Masako returned to her lab, her steps lighter, her purpose renewed. She gathered her team, their faces reflecting the same determination she felt. "We have a long road ahead of us," she said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. "But we will prevail. We will show the Council that humanity is not so easily broken." The team nodded, their eyes shining with a fierce resolve. They were ready to face the impossible, to push the boundaries of science, to forge a new path for humanity. The work began anew, the lab once again filled with the sounds of scientific inquiry. But now, there was a new energy in the air, hope that had been absent for so long. The harsh, artificial lights reflected off stainless steel surfaces, casting the room in a clinical glow. The air hummed with the low drone of centrifuges and the sharp clicks of pipettes dispensing precise measurements. The scent of antiseptic and sterilized equipment hung heavy in the air, a familiar but unwelcome reminder of the stakes. Dr. Nakamura moved through the lab with a focused intensity, her white coat billowing behind her. She paused at each workstation, her keen eyes scanning data readouts, her questions sharp and incisive. "Dr. Chen," she addressed the young bioengineer, her voice carrying over the ambient noise. "Any progress on the tissue sample analysis?" Chen looked up from her microscope, her face a mask of concentration. "It's remarkable," she said, her voice hushed with awe. "The cellular structure is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's both organic and metallic, a perfect fusion of biology and technology." Masako leaned closer, peering into the microscope. The image was breathtaking, a network of interwoven fibers, shimmering with an iridescent sheen, pulsing with an energy that seemed to defy the laws of nature. "It's alive," she whispered, a shiver running down her spine. Across the lab, Dr. Harper, the head of the facility, watched the exchange with a mixture of fascination and concern. He had handpicked this team, the best and brightest minds humanity had to offer. But even they seemed dwarfed by the enormity of the task before them. "Dr. Nakamura," he called out, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the lab. "Can you join me in my office? We need to discuss the implications of your findings." Masako nodded, a sense of foreboding settling in her stomach. She followed Harper out of the lab, her mind racing. What had they discovered, and what did it mean for the future of humanity? Masako followed Dr. Harper down the sterile corridor, her footsteps echoing against the cold, metal walls. The weight of the situation pressed down on her, a tangible force that made each step feel heavier than the last. She couldn't shake the feeling that their discoveries, while groundbreaking, were also a Pandora's box, unleashing possibilities both wondrous and terrifying. Harper's office was a sanctuary of quiet amidst the bustling facility. The soft leather of the chairs, the rich mahogany of the desk, the muted lighting, it all created an atmosphere of hushed importance. Masako took a seat, her hands nervously fidgeting in her lap. Harper settled into his chair, his face etched with a thoughtful frown. "Dr. Nakamura," he began, his voice low and measured, "I won't mince words. Your team's findings have profound implications, not just for our scientific understanding, but for the very survival of our species." Masako nodded, her throat tight. "We believe the ship's technology represents a quantum leap beyond anything we've ever encountered. The bio-organic integration, the adaptive capabilities, it's almost like magic." Harper leaned forward, his eyes intense. "And the power source?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The living aspect?" Masako took a deep breath, steeling herself. "The entire ship is a single, sentient organism. It's not just a vessel, it's a living being. It's learning, adapting, evolving." Harper's face paled. "A living ship?" he echoed, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and dread. "Can we Control it? That's the million-dollar question, Masako admitted. We've only scratched the surface of its capabilities, but the potential, it's limitless. Imagine, Doctor, ships that can heal themselves, adapt to any environment, even consume their enemies. Harper's eyes widened. Consume. The ship absorbed our probe, Masako explained, her voice heavy. It feeds on matter, on energy. It's a predator, in a sense. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken implications. This changes everything, Harper said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The Council, they won't stand for this. They'll see it as a threat, a challenge to their dominance. Masako's jaw tightened. Let them come, she said. We won't let them dictate our fate any longer. We'll use this technology to fight back, to protect our people. Harper studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he nodded slowly. You're right, Dr. Nakamura, he said, his voice firm. We have to prepare. We have to be ready for what comes next. He reached for a secure comm panel on his desk, his fingers punching in a series of codes. Get me General Rios, he ordered. It's time to mobilize. The comm panel on Harper's desk lit up, the holographic image of General Rios flickering into existence. His face was weathered and scarred, but his eyes, usually sharp and focused, now held a flicker of uncertainty. Dr. Harper, Rios' voice boomed through the speakers. I trust you have news? Harper nodded grimly. We do, General, and it's not good. He proceeded to brief Rios on the findings of Dr. Nakamura and her team, the alien ship's bio-organic nature, its sentient power source, and its terrifying capabilities. Rios listened in silence, his expression growing increasingly grim. When Harper finished, the general leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the armrest. A living ship, he muttered, his voice barely audible. And it consumes other ships? That's what the data suggests, Harper confirmed. It's a predator, General, and we're its prey. Rios' silence stretched on, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had spent his entire career preparing for war, but this was unlike anything he had ever imagined. What are our options? He asked finally, his voice rough with emotion. Dr. Nakamura believes we can replicate the technology, Harper said, his voice cautious. Create our own living ships. Rios' eyebrows shot up. Living ships? Are you serious? It's our only chance, General, Harper said. The Council's fleet outnumbers ours 10-1. We can't win a conventional war. Rios rubbed his temples, his face etched with a strain of command. And what if we can't control this technology? He asked, his voice laced with a hint of fear. What if it turns on us? That's a risk we have to take, Harper replied, his voice firm. The alternative is extinction. Rios nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the holographic image of the alien ship. He had seen the devastation of war firsthand, the countless lives lost in the defense of humanity. But this was a gamble on a scale he had never contemplated before. Very well, he said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision. Mobilize the fleet. Prepare for war. He leaned forward, his eyes meeting Harper's. But understand this, Doctor, if we fail, if this technology turns against us, it will be on your heads. The comm panel flickered, and Rios' image vanished, leaving Harper alone in his office. He stared at the empty screen, his heart heavy with the burden of responsibility. He had made his choice. Now it was up to the scientists to deliver. The lab pulsed with renewed energy, each scientist driven by a singular purpose. The once sterile space now seemed alive, the air thrumming with the unspoken tension of a race against time. Dr. Chen, her pink hair pulled back in a messy bun, hunched over her workstation, her fingers deftly manipulating a holographic interface. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, a symphony of algorithms and genetic sequences. She chewed on her lower lip, a nervous habit that betrayed her anxiety. Across the room, Dr. Singh paced back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back, muttering under his breath in rapid-fire Punjabi. The alien alloy sample lay on his workbench, its shimmering surface mocking his every attempt to analyze it. Masako moved between them, her presence a calming force amidst the chaos. She paused beside Chen, her eyes scanning the holographic display. "Any luck?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. Chen shook her head, her frustration evident. "The protein synthesis is proving to be more difficult than we anticipated," she admitted. "The alien cells are resistant. They seem to have a built-in defense mechanism that prevents us from replicating their structures." Masako nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "We need to find a way around it," she said. "Perhaps we can try a different approach, a more indirect method." She moved on to Singh's workstation, her keen eyes taking in the array of instruments and data readouts. "Any breakthroughs on the alloy?" she inquired. Singh ran a hand through his beard, a sigh escaping his lips. "It's like trying to catch smoke," he grumbled. "The molecular structure is constantly shifting, adapting to our every attempt to analyze it." Masako studied the holographic display, the complex lattice of atoms pulsing and rearranging itself in a mesmerizing dance. "It's almost like it's alive," she murmured, a shiver running down her spine. Singh nodded grimly. "That's what it feels like," he agreed. "It's like it's fighting back." The weight of their task pressed down on them, heavy and suffocating. The clock was ticking, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. But in the face of this seemingly insurmountable challenge, they were scientists, explorers, problem solvers. They would not be deterred. Masako looked at her team, their faces etched with determination. She saw the fire in their eyes, the refusal to surrender to despair. "We will find a way," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "We will crack this code, and we will give humanity a fighting chance." Masako's words hung in the air, a challenge to the silent fear that had begun to creep into the lab. The scientists exchanged glances, a mix of determination and apprehension in their eyes. They knew the stakes, the weight of the world resting on their shoulders. Dr. Chen, her fingers still dancing across the holographic interface, spoke up, her voice hesitant yet firm. "We've been focusing on replicating the individual components," she said. "But maybe we need to look at the bigger picture. The ship isn't just a collection of parts, it's a system, an ecosystem." Masako nodded, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "You're right, Emily," she said. "We need to understand the interconnectivity, the way the organic and inorganic elements work together to create this living entity." She turned to Dr. Singh, her gaze meeting his. "Rajiv, can you run a full spectral analysis of the alloy sample? I want to see if there are any energy patterns, any fluctuations that might indicate communication or interaction with the organic components." Singh nodded, his eyes lighting up with a spark of scientific curiosity. "I'll get right on it," he said, already adjusting the settings on his spectrometer. The lab fell into a focused silence, broken only by the soft hum of machinery and the occasional click of a pipette. Hours passed, and the tension in the room grew with each passing minute. The scientists worked tirelessly, their minds consumed by the puzzle before them. Suddenly, Singh let out a sharp gasp. "Masako, come quick," he called out, his voice urgent. Masako rushed to his side, her heart pounding in her chest. She peered at the spectrometer's readout, her eyes widening in surprise. It's communicating," Singh said, his voice filled with awe. "The alloy is sending signals, pulses of energy that are being received and responded to by the organic tissue." Masako stared at the screen, the complex waveforms dancing before her eyes. It was a language, a conversation between metal and flesh, a symphony of life and technology. "It's alive," she whispered, a sense of wonder washing over her. "The ship. It's not just a machine. It's aware." The implications of their discovery were staggering. They had stumbled upon a level of sentience, of consciousness, that defied all human understanding. The alien ship was not just a weapon, a tool to be exploited. It was a being, a living entity with its own will, its purpose. Unease washed over Masako. They had opened a door to the unknown, a door that might lead to salvation or destruction. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and the choices they made now would determine their future. The lab's silence was broken by the soft chime of an incoming message. Masako turned to see Dr. Harper's face on the comm screen, his expression grave. "Masako," he said, his voice urgent, "we have a situation. The Council has sent a delegation. They're on their way to Earth." The sleek, silver Council ship pierced Earth's atmosphere, its alien design a clear difference to the familiar blue and green planet below. It descended gracefully, landing on a specially constructed platform in the heart of Geneva. A hush fell over the gathered crowd, a mix of fear and curiosity etched on their faces. President Vance stood at the edge of the platform, her posture rigid, her expression carefully neutral. Beside her, General Rios, his military bearing impeccable, surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. The ship's hatch hissed open, releasing cool, conditioned air. A ramp extended, and a delegation of alien figures emerged, their forms shrouded in shimmering robes. The lead figure, tall and slender, moved with an effortless grace that belied its alien physiology. Its face was obscured by a cowl, but its presence radiated an aura of power and authority. "Greetings, humans," the figure's voice, amplified by a translator device, echoed across the platform. It was a smooth, androgynous voice, devoid of any discernible emotion. "I am Ambassador Zalax, emissary of the Galactic Council. We have come to receive your tribute." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the Council's ultimatum. Vance stepped forward, her chin held high. "Ambassador Zalax," she said, her voice clear and resolute. "We have received your message, and we have a response." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "Humanity will not surrender. We will not be your slaves. We will fight for our freedom, for our right to exist." The ambassador tilted its head slightly, a gesture that could have been interpreted as surprise or amusement. "Fight?" it echoed, its voice dripping with disdain. "You are a broken species, clinging to a dying planet. You have no hope of resisting the Council's might." Vance's jaw tightened. "We may be broken," she said, her voice rising, "but we are not defeated. We have a spirit that cannot be extinguished, a will to survive that burns brighter than any star." She turned to the crowd, her voice echoing across the platform. "Humanity will not kneel. We will stand tall, and we will fight for our future." A roar erupted from the crowd, a primal cry that shook the very foundations of the platform. The ambassador recoiled, its composure momentarily shattered. It had expected submission, groveling pleas for mercy. Instead, it was met with the unwavering spirit of a species pushed to the brink. The ambassador's eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger flashing beneath its cowl. "Foolish humans," it hissed. "You have sealed your fate. The Council will not tolerate your defiance." It turned and retreated into its ship, the ramp retracting with a metallic clang. The hatch sealed shut, leaving an ominous silence in its wake. Vance watched the ship rise into the sky, a silver dagger piercing the heart of the twilight. She turned to General Rios, her eyes filled with a steely determination. "It's time," she said, her voice firm. "Prepare the fleet. We have a war to win." The news of the Council's ultimatum reached Tycho with the cold finality of a death sentence. The scientists and engineers, already working at a feverish pace, redoubled their efforts. The once sterile labs now throbbed with desperate energy, the air thick with the smell of burnt coffee, and the nervous sweat of 1,000 brilliant minds pushed to their limits. Masako moved through the chaos, her presence a beacon of calm amidst the storm. She checked in on each team, offering words of encouragement and pushing them to dig deeper, to think outside the box. In the bioengineering lab, Chen's eyes were bloodshot, her fingers stained with the alien tissue samples she had been dissecting for days. "We're close," she said, her voice hoarse but determined. "The regenerative properties. We're starting to understand the underlying mechanisms." Masako nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Keep at it, Emily. We need those results." She moved on to Singh's workstation, where the materials scientist was hunched over a holographic display, his brow furrowed in concentration. The alien alloy sample, once a source of frustration, now pulsed with a faint, rhythmic glow. "I think I've cracked it," Singh said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The alloy's adaptive properties, they're not just a reaction to external stimuli. They're intentional. It's like the metal has a will of its own." Masako's heart skipped a beat. "Can we control it?" she asked, her voice urgent. Singh hesitated, his eyes filled with a mix of excitement and fear. "I believe so," he said slowly. "But it won't be easy. It's like trying to tame a wild animal." The implications of his words were staggering. If they could control the alloy, they could create ships that were not just resilient, but truly alive. Ships that could fight, adapt, and evolve in the face of any threat. But time was running out. The Council's deadline loomed over them, a dark cloud threatening to extinguish their newfound hope. Masako gathered her team, their faces reflecting the exhaustion and determination that had become their constant companions. "We're close," she said, her voice firm. "Closer than we've ever been. But we need to push harder, faster. We need to make this work." She paused, her gaze sweeping across their faces. "The fate of humanity rests on our shoulders. We cannot fail." The scientists nodded, their eyes burning with a fierce resolve. They returned to their work, their fingers flying across keyboards, their minds racing to solve the final pieces of the puzzle. The lab pulsed with a frenetic energy. The once pristine white walls were now marred with scribbled equations and hastily drawn diagrams. The air crackled with the static charge of overworked machinery, and the tension of minds stretched to their breaking point. Dr. Chen, fueled by a potent mix of caffeine and adrenaline, hunched over her workstation, her eyes glued to the holographic display. The alien protein structures danced before her, a complex ballet of molecules that held the secrets of life and regeneration. "It's working," she exclaimed, her voice hoarse from days of sleepless nights. "The synthetic proteins are bonding with the human cells. The regenerative process, it's initiating." Masako rushed to her side, her heart pounding in her chest. The holographic display showed a microscopic battlefield, human cells intertwining with the alien proteins, a delicate dance of creation and adaptation. "This is it," Masako whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We're witnessing the birth of a new era." Across the lab, Dr. Singh let out a triumphant shout. "I've got it," he exclaimed, his voice booming through the room. "The alloy. I can control it." He held up a small, metallic sphere, its surface shimmering with an iridescent glow. It pulsed rhythmically, responding to his touch, its shape morphing and reforming in his hand. It's alive," he breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. The lab erupted in cheers. The scientists, their faces etched with exhaustion, embraced each other, their laughter echoing through the once sterile halls. They had done it. They had cracked the code and unlocked the secrets of the alien ship. But amidst the celebration, a cold realization settled over Masako. They had taken the first step, but the journey was far from over. The true test lay ahead, in the crucible of war. She looked at her team, their faces alight with triumph. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, heavier than ever before. She had made a promise to the President, to Alex, to all of humanity. And she would keep it. Masako stood at the edge of the jubilant crowd, a bittersweet smile playing on her lips. They had achieved a remarkable feat, but the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that their discovery could be both a salvation and a curse, pressed heavily on her heart. She watched as Chen and Singh, their faces alight with excitement, demonstrated their breakthroughs. The synthetic proteins pulsed with life, and the alloy sphere danced in Singh's hand. "It's incredible," Harper's voice boomed over the lab's intercom, his tone a mixture of awe and apprehension. "You've done it, Masako. You and your team have given us a fighting chance." Masako's smile faltered. A fighting chance? But at what cost? She thought of Alex, his sacrifice echoing in the silence of her mind. She thought of the Intrepid crew, their courage and determination in the face of the unknown. And she thought of the billions of lives on Earth, their fate hanging in the balance. "We're not done yet, Doctor," she said, her voice firm, her resolve unwavering. "This is just the beginning. We have to weaponize this technology, turn it into something that can protect us, that can give us a future." Harper's voice crackled over the comm. "I understand, Masako. But be careful. This power, it's a double-edged sword. We must wield it with wisdom and restraint." Masako nodded, her gaze returning to her team. They were celebrating, yes, but she could see the shadows of doubt lingering in their eyes. They were scientists, not soldiers. They had unlocked a power that could save the world, but also destroy it. "We have a long road ahead of us," she said, her voice steady. "We have to ensure that this technology is used for good, for the betterment of humanity. We cannot let it become a weapon of oppression, a tool for those who seek power at any cost." Her team nodded, their faces serious. They understood the gravity of their responsibility. They were not just scientists, they were the guardians of a newfound power, a power that could shape the destiny of their species. The celebration subsided, replaced by a quiet determination. The scientists returned to their workstations, their focus sharpened, their purpose clear. They had glimpsed the future, a future where humanity could stand tall among the stars. But they also knew that the path to that future was fraught with peril. The burden of hope rested heavily on their shoulders. In the conference room, military strategists, engineers, and scientists, a diverse assembly of humanity's finest minds, huddled around a holographic table, their faces illuminated by the pulsating blue light of the miniature power core. General Rios, his posture ramrod straight, addressed the group. "We have a window of opportunity," he said, his voice grave. "The Council's delegation is still on Earth, their fleet temporarily grounded. We need to use this time to our advantage." Masako, standing beside him, nodded in agreement. "We've made significant progress in understanding the alien technology," she said. "But we need to translate that knowledge into a weapon, something that can give us a fighting chance." A seasoned engineer, Commander Isabella Cortez, leaned forward, her dark eyes sparkling with intensity. "We've been analyzing the Intrepid schematics," she said, her voice clipped and efficient. "The ship's structure, its propulsion systems, its weaponry. We believe we can integrate the alien technology into our existing designs." A holographic image of a sleek, fighter-class vessel materialized above the table. Its familiar lines were now augmented with organic growths, pulsating with the same eerie luminescence as the alien ship. "We call it the Leviathan," Cortez continued. "It's a bio-organic hybrid, combining the best of human engineering with the adaptive capabilities of the alien technology." Murmurs of excitement rippled through the room. The scientists leaned closer, their faces a mix of awe and apprehension. The military leaders, their postures tense, studied the holographic image with a critical eye. General Rios cleared his throat, his voice booming through the room. "This is impressive, Commander," he said. "But can it fight? Can it stand against the Council's fleet?" Cortez nodded confidently. "We believe so, General. The Leviathan's adaptive armor and regenerative capabilities will make it nearly indestructible. And its bio-organic weaponry. Let's just say the Council has never seen anything like it." A sense of anticipation filled the room. The scientists and engineers exchanged hopeful glances. Could this be the answer? The weapon that would turn the tide of the war? Masako felt a surge of adrenaline, a thrill of possibility mixed with a deep sense of responsibility. They were on the cusp of something extraordinary, something that could change the course of human history. But she also knew that the road ahead was fraught with challenges. The Leviathan was just a prototype, a theoretical concept brought to life. It would take time, resources, and unwavering dedication to turn it into a reality. And even then, there was no guarantee of success. The Council was a formidable enemy, their technology and tactics honed over centuries of galactic dominance. But Masako refused to let doubt cloud her vision. She looked at her team, their faces alight with the fire of innovation. They were the best and brightest, the torchbearers of humanity's future. "We will build this ship," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "We will create a weapon that will make the Council tremble. We will show them that humanity will not go quietly into the night." The scientists and engineers' faces alight with a shared purpose, and exchanged determined nods and firm handshakes. "Let's get to work," Masako said, her voice ringing with a newfound confidence. "We have a ship to build." The lab transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Teams huddled around workbenches, their conversations a rapid-fire exchange of technical jargon and creative solutions. Holographic blueprints flickered into existence. In one corner, Chen and her team meticulously cultivated the bio-organic material, their movements precise and practiced. The air hummed with the gentle whir of incubators, and the faint scent of nutrient solution filled the space. Across the lab, Singh and his engineers worked on the alloy framework, their faces etched with concentration as they manipulated the living metal. Sparks flew as they welded and shaped the material, its iridescent surface shimmering under the harsh fluorescent lights. Masako moved among them, her presence a source of both inspiration and reassurance. She answered questions, offered guidance, and shared in their moments of frustration and triumph. Days turned into nights. They faced countless setbacks, the bio-organic material proved volatile, and the alloy resisted their attempts to shape it into the desired form. But with each challenge, they learned, adapted, and grew stronger. One evening, as the lunar sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the crater, a hush fell over the lab. A massive, skeletal frame, a fusion of metal and organic growths, stood proudly in the center of the room. It was the nascent form of the Leviathan. Masako stood before it, her heart swelling with a mix of awe and trepidation. It was beautiful, in a strange, alien way. It was also terrifying, a weapon of unimaginable power. She reached out, her hand tracing the smooth curve of the bio-organic armor. It pulsed beneath her touch, a living, breathing entity. "It's magnificent," Chen whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Masako nodded, her gaze fixed on the ship's embryonic form. "It's also a responsibility," she said, her voice grave. "A responsibility we cannot afford to take lightly." The weight of the world rested on their shoulders, but at that moment, Masako felt a surge of hope. They had created something extraordinary, something that could change the course of history. The Leviathan's skeletal frame dominated the cavernous hangar, its organic growths and metallic struts reaching toward the ceiling like the ribs of a slumbering giant. The air hummed with the low thrum of machinery, and the sharp smell of welding fumes mingled with the earthy scent of the bio-organic material. Engineers in protective suits swarmed over the structure, their torches and laser cutters flashing in the dim light. Masako stood on a catwalk overlooking the hangar, her gaze fixed on the growing ship. She watched as the engineers carefully integrated the bio-organic power core into the ship's framework, its pulsating glow casting an eerie light on their faces. Beside her, General Rios, his arms crossed, observed the scene with a critical eye. "It's impressive," he admitted, his voice gruff. "But will it work?" Masako met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a quiet confidence. "It will," she said. "It has to." Rios nodded, a flicker of hope crossing his weathered features. "The Council's fleet is vast," he reminded her. "Their ships are powerful, their weapons devastating." "Our ships will be different," Masako said, her voice firm. "They will be alive, adaptable, unpredictable. They will be the embodiment of humanity's will to survive." Rio's lips curled into a faint smile. "I hope you're right, Doctor," he said. "The fate of our world rests on it." Weeks turned into months, the Leviathan taking shape at an astonishing pace. The bio-organic components, once resistant to their efforts, now seemed to eagerly integrate with the ship's systems, their growth guided by the scientists' careful manipulations. The hangar echoed with the sounds of progress, the hiss of hydraulics, the whir of drills, the excited chatter of engineers and scientists working in unison. Masako watched the final pieces of the ship's armor being fitted into place. A sense of awe washed over her. The Leviathan was no longer just a collection of parts. It was a living, breathing entity. She turned to Chen, her eyes sparkling with pride. "It's beautiful," she said. Chen smiled, her exhaustion forgotten. "It's more than that," she replied. "It's our future." The final checks were completed, and the systems were online. The Leviathan stood ready for its maiden voyage. But as the hangar doors slid open, revealing the vast expanse of space beyond, uncertainty washed over Masako. They had created a weapon, yes, but would it be enough? The Leviathan pulsed with life, its organic growths shimmering in the starlight. It was a predator, hungry and eager for the hunt. And its prey awaited. The hangar doors slid open, revealing the inky blackness of space, speckled with distant stars. The Leviathan sat nestled within its cradle, its bio-organic form gleaming under the harsh artificial lights. It was a creature of both beauty and terror, its sleek lines hinting at the raw power contained within. A hush fell over the assembled crowd as Captain Eva Martinez, chosen to pilot the prototype, stepped onto the bridge. The air crackled with nervous energy, the silence punctuated only by the soft hum of the ship's systems coming online. Eva took her seat in the command chair, her fingers tracing the contours of the bio-organic controls. The ship's interface, a network of pulsating veins and glowing nodes, responded to her touch, a symbiotic connection forming between pilot and vessel. "All systems nominal," the comm officer reported, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Eva nodded, her gaze fixed on the viewport. "Prepare for launch," she ordered, her voice echoing through the ship's speakers. The Leviathan shuddered, its organic frame coming alive. A low, guttural growl resonated through the hangar, a primal sound that sent shivers down the spines of the onlookers. The ship lifted from its cradle, its engines emitting a soft, bioluminescent glow. It glided effortlessly through the hangar doors, its movements fluid and graceful, belying its immense size and power. Eva gripped the controls, her heart pounding in her chest. She had flown countless ships in her career, but this was different. The Leviathan was not just a machine. It was an extension of herself, its consciousness intertwined with her own. She guided the ship out of Luna's orbit, towards the asteroid belt that ringed the inner solar system. The vast expanse of space stretched out before her, a canvas of infinite possibilities. "Initiating hyperspace jump," she announced, her voice echoing through the empty corridors of the ship. The Leviathan surged forward, its organic engines warping the fabric of space-time. The stars blurred, stretching into streaks of light, and then, with a jolt, they were in hyperspace, hurtling through the void at unimaginable speeds. Eva closed her eyes, savoring the sensation of weightlessness, the freedom of movement that only space could offer. But the moment of peace was fleeting. The comm officer's voice, filled with alarm, shattered the silence. "Captain, we're detecting multiple contacts. Unidentified vessels, closing fast." Eva's eyes snapped open. She checked the tactical display, her heart sinking. A squadron of Council warships, their sleek, metallic forms a stark contrast to the organic curves of the Leviathan, was converging on their position. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice echoing through the ship. "Prepare to engage." The Leviathan responded, its organic systems humming with a newfound energy. Weapon ports opened, revealing a terrifying array of bio-organic cannons and energy projectors. The ship's living armor rippled and shifted, preparing for the onslaught. Eva's grip tightened on the controls. This was it. The moment of truth. She met the gaze of her crew, their faces a mix of fear and determination. "Let's show them what we're made of," she said, her voice filled with a steely resolve. The Leviathan roared into battle, a predator unleashed upon its prey. The Council warships, sleek and menacing, swarmed towards the Leviathan like a pack of wolves. Their energy cannons blazed, unleashing a torrent of destructive fire that painted the void in a deadly light show. Eva's hands danced across the controls, her every move mirrored by the ship's organic systems. The Leviathan twisted and turned, its movements impossibly fluid, dodging the incoming fire with an almost playful ease. "They can't hit us," Turner shouted, his voice a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. "Don't get cocky," Eva warned, her eyes scanning the tactical display. "They're just probing our defenses." She was right. The Council ships adjusted their tactics, their fire concentrating on a single point on the Leviathan's flank. The bio-organic armor rippled and buckled under the onslaught, the air filling with the acrid smell of scorched flesh. "We're taking damage," the comm officer's voice was strained. Eva gritted her teeth. "Damage control, report." "The armor is regenerating, Captain," came the reply, a hint of wonder in the engineer's voice. It's healing itself." Eva felt a surge of hope. The Leviathan was fighting back, its alien biology adapting to the threat. "Return fire," she ordered, her voice ringing through the ship. The Leviathan's bio-organic cannons unleashed a torrent of energy, the beams lancing through the void, striking the lead Council ship with devastating force. The enemy vessel shuddered, its shields flickering, then collapsing under the sustained attack. A cheer erupted on the bridge as the Council ship exploded in a fiery ball of debris. But the celebration was short-lived. The remaining warships, their formation broken, now attacked with a renewed ferocity. The Leviathan shuddered under the onslaught, its organic systems straining to keep up with the damage. Eva fought to maintain control, her hands slick with sweat, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "We can't keep this up," Dr. Liu's voice was grave, his face pale. "The ship's energy reserves are depleting rapidly." Eva's heart sank. They were running out of time, out of options. And then she felt it. A subtle shift in the ship's consciousness, a primal hunger emanating from its core. "The ship. It's hungry," she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of awe and terror. The Leviathan lurched forward, its movements no longer evasive but predatory. Its maw, once a gaping wound, now pulsed with a ravenous energy. "What's happening?" Turner's voice was filled with panic. "It's feeding," Dr. Liu said, his eyes wide with horror. "It's consuming the enemy ships." The Leviathan closed in on its prey, its organic tendrils lashing out, ensnaring the Council warships. The enemy vessels struggled, their weapons firing futilely against the bio-organic armor. One by one, they were drawn into the Leviathan's maw, their metal hulls dissolving, their energy absorbed. The ship grew stronger with each kill, its luminescence intensifying, its organic systems humming with newfound power. The remaining Council ships, their formation shattered, turned and fled, their engines screaming in terror. The Leviathan gave chase, its hunger insatiable. Eva watched the retreating enemy, a sense of triumph warring with a deep unease. They had won, but at what cost? The ship they had created was a monster, a force of nature unleashed upon the galaxy. She turned to Dr. Liu, her eyes searching his. "Can we control it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Liu hesitated, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. "I don't know, Captain," he admitted. "We've awakened something ancient, something powerful, and we may not be able to contain it." Eva's heart sank. They had defied the Council, yes, but had they unleashed an even greater threat upon the universe? The Leviathan returned to Luna, its hunger sated, its form pulsating with newfound power. The news of the breakthrough at Tycho spread across the globe like wildfire, carried on the wings of digital signals and whispered conversations. In the war-torn cities, in the refugee camps, in the quiet corners of homes and hearts, a spark of hope ignited. Humanity, once teetering on the brink of despair, dared to dream again. In the bustling streets of New Mumbai, the holographic news feeds that had once broadcast images of destruction and despair now displayed the sleek, bio-organic form of the Leviathan. The crowd that gathered, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now buzzed with a newfound energy. Sarah Turner, her face still etched with the grief of her son's loss, watched the newsfeed with a mix of sadness and pride. Alex's sacrifice had not been in vain. It had paved the way for this moment, this glimmer of hope in the darkness. He would have wanted this, she whispered to herself, her fingers tracing the outline of his face on the datapad screen. He would have wanted us to fight. In the heart of Geneva, President Vance addressed the General Assembly, her voice echoing through the Grand Chamber. "We have been tested," she declared, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the assembled delegates. "We have been pushed to the brink of extinction, but we have not broken. We have not surrendered." Her words were met with a thunderous applause, a wave of emotion sweeping through the chamber. The delegates, representing nations from every corner of the globe, stood united, their faces alight with a shared determination. "The Galactic Council demands our submission," Vance continued, her voice rising. "They demand that we kneel before them, that we sacrifice our freedom, our dignity, our very souls. But we will not comply. We will not be their slaves." Her words ignited a fire in the hearts of those present. The chamber echoed with cheers and shouts, a chorus of voices raised in unison against the tyranny of the Council. "We have a weapon now," Vance declared, her voice ringing with a newfound confidence. "A weapon forged from the ashes of our despair, a weapon that will show the Council that humanity will not go quietly into the night." A holographic image of the Leviathan materialized above the podium, its bio-organic form a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. The delegates gasped, their eyes wide with awe and wonder. "This is our answer," Vance said, her voice firm. "This is our future." The chamber erupted in cheers, the sound reverberating through the halls of the United Earth Government, a clarion call that echoed across the globe. Humanity was ready for war. The Tycho facility was busy with sounds of clanging metal, whirring drills, and humming of machinery pushed to its limits. The once pristine white corridors were now stained with grease and grime, the air thick with the smell of welding fumes and ozone. Engineers in bulky, protective suits swarmed over the skeletal frames of new Leviathans, their torches and laser cutters flashing in the harsh artificial light. Each weld, each connection, was a testament to their skill and determination. In the biolabs, rows upon rows of bioreactors bubbled and churned, the nutrient-rich solutions within them teeming with the building blocks of life. Scientists, their faces etched with exhaustion, monitored the growth of the bio-organic components, their every move precise and calculated. Masako moved through the controlled chaos, her white coat flapping open as she navigated the crowded corridors. She paused to observe a team of engineers struggling to integrate a complex network of bio-organic conduits into the ship's framework. "Any issues?" she asked, her voice calm amidst the surrounding din. The lead engineer, a young woman named Anya Petrova, no relation to the Intrepid's Dr. Petrova, wiped a bead of sweat from her brow. "We're having trouble getting the organic matter to interface with a ship's neural network," she explained, her voice tinged with frustration. "It's like it's rejecting us." Masako nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "It's a living system," she reminded Anya. "It has its own will, its own instincts. We need to find a way to communicate with it, to gain its trust." She turned to Dr. Chen, who had been observing the process from a nearby console. "Emily, can you analyze the biosignals? See if you can identify any patterns, any clues to its behavior." Chen nodded, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. "I'm on it, Dr. Nakamura," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet determination. Masako continued her rounds, her keen eyes missing nothing. She offered words of encouragement, solved technical disputes, and ensured that every team was working in sync. The pressure was immense. The Council's deadline loomed over them like a dark cloud, a constant reminder of the stakes. But Masako refused to let fear cripple them. She knew that humanity's survival depended on their success. As the days turned into weeks, the Leviathans began to take shape. Their bio-organic forms, once skeletal and incomplete, now pulsed with life, their sleek lines a testament to the fusion of human ingenuity and alien technology. One by one, the ships were moved to the launch bays, their massive forms dwarfing the human engineers who had brought them to life. The sight of the growing fleet filled Masako with a sense of awe and wonder. It was a testament to humanity's resilience, their refusal to surrender to despair. But the true test lay ahead. The Council's armada was vast, their weapons powerful. The Leviathans were a gamble, a desperate hope against overwhelming odds. Masako watched as the first ship prepared for launch, its engines thrumming with barely contained power. She thought of Alex, of his sacrifice, of the countless lives lost in the war. This was for them. This was for humanity. And it was just the beginning. The launch bay was a cavernous space, its steel girders and harsh floodlights casting an industrial chill over the scene. At its heart, the Leviathan rested, a bio-organic anomaly amidst the cold machinery. Its sleek form, a fusion of metal and living tissue, pulsed with a subdued luminescence, hinting at the raw power contained within. The gathered technicians, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and nervous anticipation, moved with a quiet efficiency, their final checks a well-rehearsed ballet. Eva Martinez, chosen to pilot this marvel, stood at the base of the gantry, her gaze fixed on the ship. She'd flown countless missions, faced down pirates and hostile aliens, but nothing had prepared her for this. This wasn't just a ship, it was a living, breathing entity. She took a deep breath, the recycled air tasting faintly of ozone. It was time. Her boots clanged against the metal steps as she ascended the gantry. The crew, already strapped into their stations, watched her approach, their eyes mirroring her own mix of determination and trepidation. She slid into the command chair, the ship's organic interface responding to her touch with a gentle warmth. "Captain on the bridge," the calm officer's voice, usually so steady, held a tremor of excitement. "All systems are go, Captain." Dr. Liu's voice crackled over the comm, a hint of pride evident even through the static. Eva nodded, her gaze drawn to the viewport. Beyond the thick glass, the hangar doors stood open, framing a breathtaking view of the Earth, a vibrant blue and green oasis against the stark backdrop of space. It was a sight that never failed to move her, a reminder of what they were fighting for. "Prepare for launch," she ordered, her voice echoing through the ship's speakers. The Leviathan shuddered, a low growl emanating from its depths, a primal sound that sent a shiver down Eva's spine. The ship's organic systems hummed to life, a symphony of biological and mechanical processes merging into a harmonious whole. With a gentle lurch, the Leviathan rose from its cradle, its bioluminescent engines casting an ethereal glow on the hangar floor. It glided through the open doors, its movements smooth and effortless. As the Leviathan pierced the atmosphere, a collective gasp echoed across Earth. Billions watched, their screens filled with the awe-inspiring sight of the bio-organic ship ascending into the heavens. In the war-torn cities, in the refugee camps, in the quiet corners of homes and hearts, a wave of hope surged. Humanity, once on the brink of despair, dared to dream again. On the bridge of a Council warship, lurking in the shadows of a distant asteroid, Ambassador Zalax watched the transmission with a growing sense of unease. The human ship, a grotesque mockery of the Council's sleek vessels, represented a defiance he had not anticipated. "Inform the High Council," he commanded, his voice cold and flat. "The humans have created a weapon. They are preparing to resist." The High Councilor's image flickered on the screen, its 6 eyes narrowed in displeasure. "A weapon?" it hissed, its voice a grating rasp that echoed through the chamber. "The humans dare to challenge us." Zalax bowed his head, his posture conveying a carefully measured deference. "It would appear so, High Counselor. Their creation is unconventional, but its power is undeniable." A ripple of murmurs spread through the council chamber. The assembled representatives, a diverse collection of alien species, shifted in their seats, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright contempt. A hulking Thargoid, its massive form barely contained by its ornate chair, let out a guttural growl. "The humans are an insignificant species," it rumbled. They should be crushed beneath our heel for their insolence. A slender, ethereal being with shimmering wings and iridescent eyes spoke next, its voice a delicate chime. Perhaps we should exercise caution, it suggested. This new weapon, it could prove to be a formidable challenge. Zalax felt a surge of irritation. The ethereals, always so hesitant, so reluctant to use force. They had grown soft and complacent, their pacifist tendencies a liability in a galaxy ruled by strength. Caution, he scoffed, his voice laced with barely concealed contempt. The humans are a primitive species, their technology barely out of the Stone Age. They pose no threat to the Council's dominance. A ripple of agreement spread through the chamber. The Thargoid nodded its massive head, its multiple eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. The humans will learn their place, it growled. They will pay for their defiance. The High Counselor raised a six-fingered hand, silencing the room. Enough, it said, its voice commanding attention. We will not underestimate these humans. They have shown a surprising resilience, a tenacity that cannot be ignored. It turned its gaze towards Zalax, its eyes burning with an intensity that made him shiver. Ambassador, it said, its voice a chilling whisper, you will return to Earth. You will deliver a final ultimatum. They will surrender their weapon and submit to our authority, or they will face the consequences. Zalax bowed his head, his heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. He had failed to contain the human threat, and now he was being sent back to face their defiance. He knew that this time there would be no room for negotiation. The Council's patience had worn thin, and the reckoning was at hand. The news of the Council's impending return spread like wildfire, casting a long shadow over the newfound hope that had blossomed on Earth. Fear mingled with defiance, creating a volatile atmosphere of anticipation and dread. In the bustling streets of New Mumbai, the holographic news feeds flickered with images of the sleek Council ship, its alien design a chilling reminder of the power they wielded. The crowds that had once cheered the Leviathan's launch now stood in stunned silence, their faces etched with worry. Sarah Turner, her hand clutching her son's datapad, felt a cold knot of fear tighten in her stomach. She had lost Alex to the fight for humanity's future, and now it seemed that future was in jeopardy once more. But amidst the fear, there was also a sense of resolve. People gathered in groups, their voices rising in passionate debates. They spoke of resistance, of sacrifice, of the unyielding human spirit that had carried them through countless trials throughout history. In the war rooms of the United Earth government, the atmosphere was charged with a grim determination. Military leaders, their faces hardened by years of conflict, strategized and planned, their holographic displays filled with tactical simulations and worst-case scenarios. General Rios paced the room, his boots echoing on the polished floor. He barked orders, his voice gruff and commanding, his every movement radiating an aura of controlled aggression. "We have to be ready for anything," he said, his gaze sweeping across the assembled officers. "The Council won't hesitate to use overwhelming force. We need to make every shot count." Dr. Petrova, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a steely resolve, nodded in agreement. "We're working on upgrading the Leviathans," she reported, "enhancing their weapon systems, improving their defenses. But we need more time." Rio's jaw clenched. "Time is a luxury we don't have, Doctor," he said, his voice clipped. "The Council is on its way. We have to be ready." The tension in the room was palpable. Every officer, every scientist, every soldier knew the stakes. They were facing an enemy far more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. But they also knew that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. They were fighting for their home, for their families, for the very survival of their species. And they would not surrender, not without a fight. The world held its breath. The news of the Council's ultimatum was a heavy weight, pressing down on every heart. Fear and uncertainty crackled in the air, a tangible tension that permeated every corner of the globe. In the shipyards orbiting Earth, the construction of new Leviathans intensified. The cacophony of metal on metal, the searing heat of welding torches, and the strained voices of engineers working in the vacuum of space created a relentless soundtrack to humanity's defiance. Commander Cortez, her face hardened by the enormity of the task, oversaw the construction. She moved through the shipyard with a brisk efficiency, her keen eyes missing no detail. The pressure was immense, but her years of experience had forged a steely core within her. "Progress report," she barked into her helmet's comm system, her voice a sharp counterpoint to the industrial symphony around her. "Hull integrity at 95%, Commander," a young engineer replied, his voice amplified through the speakers. "Bioorganic systems integration is almost complete. We're on track for launch in 2 weeks." Cortez nodded, a flicker of satisfaction crossing her face. They were making good time, but she knew the Council's fleet was out there, somewhere in the vastness of space, drawing closer with every passing hour. She paused, her gaze drawn to the Earth hanging in the viewport, a vibrant blue and green sphere against the endless black. It was a sight that stirred a deep protectiveness within her. Back on Earth, the mobilization efforts were in full swing. Military bases thrummed with activity, soldiers training day and night, their faces set in grim determination. Factories worked tirelessly, churning out weapons and ammunition, their output a vital lifeline in the face of the impending conflict. In the quiet countryside, the rhythm of life had shifted. Fields were harvested early, livestock moved to safer locations. The once peaceful landscapes now echoed with the distant rumble of military drills. In the heart of Geneva, the United Earth government worked tirelessly, their efforts a desperate scramble to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Diplomats reached out to potential allies, their pleas for aid met with cautious optimism or outright rejection. In a small village nestled in the foothills of the Himalayas, Anya Petrova sat on the porch of her family's home, her gaze fixed on the distant, snow-capped peaks. The news feeds had brought the war into their living room, its harsh reality a stark contrast to the serene beauty of their surroundings. Her father, his hands rough from years of farming, sat beside her, his expression a mask of worry. Her mother, her eyes red-rimmed, held Anya's hand, her touch a silent offering of comfort. Her younger brother, oblivious to the looming threat, played with a toy spaceship, his laughter a poignant reminder of the innocence that was at stake. Anya's heart ached. The dream of exploring the stars, a dream she had inherited from her distant relative, now seemed like a cruel mockery. The stars were no longer a source of wonder. They were a battlefield, a place where humanity's fate would be decided. She looked at her family, their faces etched with the same fear and uncertainty that she felt. And in that moment, a quiet resolve took root within her. She wouldn't let them down. She would do her part, no matter how small. She stood up, her voice firm. "I'm going to the city," she announced. "I'm going to volunteer." Her parents' faces mirrored a mix of pride and worry. They knew that the fight for humanity's survival was everyone's fight. Anya walked towards the village square, the setting sun casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. The air was heavy with a scent of wood smoke and the unspoken fear that hung over the village. But amidst the fear, there was also a sense of unity, a shared determination to face the coming storm together. The world was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. And Anya, like countless others across the globe, was ready to answer the call. Anya's footsteps echoed on the cobblestone streets as she walked towards the village square, the setting sun casting long shadows that danced and twisted like the anxieties that gnawed at her heart. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine needles and distant smoke from the village hearths. She paused at the edge of the square, her gaze drawn to the makeshift recruitment center. A long line of men and women, young and old, snaked around the building, their faces a mix of determination and apprehension. A lump formed in Anya's throat. She had always dreamed of leaving her village, of exploring the wider world. But not like this. Not with the threat of war hanging over them all. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. This was her choice, her responsibility. She joined the back of the line, her heart pounding in her chest. The faces around her were a reflection of her own community: farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, all united by a shared sense of duty. An elderly man, his face lined with wrinkles, leaned on a cane, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. A young mother, her baby cradled in her arms, stood nervously, her gaze fixed on the recruitment center's entrance. A group of teenagers, their faces a mix of bravado and fear, joked amongst themselves, their laughter a brittle attempt to mask their anxiety. Anya felt a surge of warmth towards them, a sense of kinship that transcended their individual differences. They were all in this together, facing an uncertain future with courage and resilience. The line moved slowly, the weight agonizing. Anya's mind raced, her thoughts a jumble of memories and fears. She thought of her family, of their tearful goodbyes, of the promise she had made to return. She thought of Alex, her distant cousin, whose sacrifice had ignited a spark of hope in the darkness. And she thought of the Leviathan, the bio-organic warship that represented humanity's defiance, their refusal to surrender to the Council's tyranny. Finally, it was her turn. She stepped into the recruitment center, the cool air conditioning quite different from the warmth of the afternoon sun. A uniformed officer, her face stern but kind, greeted her. "Name?" she asked, her voice clipped and efficient. "Anya Petrova," Anya replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The officer nodded, her fingers tapping on a datapad. "Skills?" she inquired. Anya hesitated. She had no formal military training, no specialized skills that would be of immediate use in the war effort. I'm a fast learner," she said, her voice soft but determined. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help." The officer studied her for a moment, her gaze piercing. Then, a flicker of approval crossed her face. "Good," she said. "We need people like you. People with courage, with heart." She handed Anya a datapad. "Fill this out," she instructed. "Then report to the processing center tomorrow morning. You'll be assigned a role based on your aptitude and the needs of the fleet." Anya took the datapad, her fingers closing around it tightly. It was a small step, a single act of defiance against the overwhelming darkness. But it was a step nonetheless. She left the recruitment center, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and red. She took a deep breath, the cool mountain air filling her lungs. "I'm coming," she whispered, her voice carried on the wind. "I'm coming to fight." The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Anya walked back to her family's farm, the datapad clutched tightly in her hand. The cool mountain air, fragrant with the scent of pine needles, did little to soothe the turmoil within her. She found her family gathered around the kitchen table, their faces etched with worry. Her mother's eyes were red-rimmed, her father's brow furrowed in concern. Her younger brother, oblivious to the tension in the room, chattered excitedly about the Leviathan and the upcoming war. Anya took a deep breath, summoning a smile. "I did it," she announced, holding up the datapad. "I enlisted." A heavy silence fell over the room. Her mother's hand reached out, gently touching Anya's arm. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "It's not too late to change your mind." Anya met her mother's gaze, her own eyes filled with a determination that surprised even herself. "I have to do this, Mom," she said, her voice firm. "For Alex. For all of us." Her father nodded slowly, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Your cousin would be proud of you," he said, his voice gruff. "He always said you had the heart of an explorer." Anya's smile wavered. The mention of Alex, the memory of his sacrifice, brought a fresh wave of grief, but it also fueled her resolve. "I'll make him proud," she vowed, her voice barely above a whisper. The next morning, Anya said her goodbyes, the weight of their unspoken fears hanging heavy in the air. Her mother's embrace was tight, her father's handshake firm. Her little brother, his eyes wide with a mix of confusion and admiration, waved goodbye, his toy spaceship clutched tightly in his hand. Anya boarded the transport shuttle, its engines roaring to life, carrying her away from the familiar comforts of her home and into the unknown. She looked out the window, the village shrinking beneath her, the mountains fading into the distance. A lump formed in her throat, but she swallowed it back. There was no room for tears, not now. She had a mission to fulfill, a duty to her family, to her world. As the shuttle pierced the atmosphere, Anya caught a glimpse of the Leviathan, its bio-organic form a silhouette against the rising sun. It was a symbol of hope. The transport shuttle docked at a sprawling military complex carved into the Martian regolith. The artificial gravity kicked in, a subtle lurch that sent a wave of nausea through Anya's stomach. She gripped the armrest of her seat, her knuckles white, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The shuttle doors hissed open, revealing a vast hangar bay filled with rows of gleaming spaceships. The air crackled with the energy of 1,000 bustling activities technicians swarming over fighter craft, pilots running pre-flight checks, and recruits like Anya, their faces a mix of eagerness and apprehension. Anya stepped off the shuttle, her boots clicking on the metal floor. The sheer scale of the operation was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the quiet simplicity of her village life. She felt a pang of homesickness, a longing for the familiar faces and comforting routines she had left behind. But she pushed the feeling aside, reminding herself of her purpose. She was here to fight, to protect her family, to honor Alex's sacrifice. A gruff voice barked over the loudspeaker, cutting through the din of the hangar. All new recruits, report to Processing Area Alpha. That's Processing Area Alpha. Move it, people. Anya joined the throng of recruits, their footsteps creating a rhythmic beat that echoed through the hangar. They were a diverse group, hailing from every corner of the globe, their faces reflecting a kaleidoscope of cultures and ethnicities. But they shared a common purpose, a shared determination to defend their home. The processing center was a maze of corridors and cubicles, its sterile white walls and harsh fluorescent lights creating a sense of impersonal efficiency. Anya was ushered from one station to the next, her fingerprints scanned, her medical history reviewed, her aptitude tested. The process was relentless, the questions probing and invasive. Anya felt exposed, her every insecurity laid bare under the scrutiny of the military evaluators. "Any prior military experience?" a stern-faced officer asked, his eyes scanning her file. Anya shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No, sir." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Any specialized skills? Engineering, piloting, anything that might be of use in the war effort?" Anya hesitated. She had always been a quick learner, but she had no formal training in any of those fields. I'm adaptable," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I'm willing to learn, to do whatever it takes." The officer nodded. "Good," he said. "We need people with that attitude, people who are willing to push their limits, to sacrifice for the greater good." He handed her a uniform and a set of dog tags. "Welcome to the fleet, recruit," he said. "Your training begins tomorrow." Anya clutched the uniform. She was no longer just a girl from a small village. She was a soldier, a defender of humanity. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders, heavy and unfamiliar. But she would not falter. She would train, she would learn, she would fight. For Alex, for her family, for Earth. The transport shuttle was a stark contrast to the peaceful serenity of Anya's village. The air was thick with a smell of sweat and recycled oxygen. Anya clutched the armrests of her seat, her stomach churning with a mix of nerves and anticipation. She looked around at her fellow recruits, their faces a mirror of her own uncertainty. Some sat in stoic silence, their eyes fixed on the viewport, while others chattered nervously, their voices a desperate attempt to break the tension. A young man with a shaved head and a tattoo snaking up his neck caught her eye. He sat alone, his gaze distant, his expression unreadable. Anya wondered what his story was, what had driven him to enlist. The shuttle shuddered as it entered Mars' atmosphere, the red planet looming large in the viewport. Anya's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the first step on her journey into the unknown. The shuttle landed with a jarring thud, its doors hissing open to reveal a vast, red desert landscape. The air was thin and cold, the gravity lighter than Earth's. Anya stumbled slightly as she stepped onto the Martian soil, her boots crunching on the dusty surface. A group of uniformed soldiers, their faces hardened by years of training, awaited them. Their commander, a tall, imposing woman with a shaved head and piercing blue eyes, barked orders, her voice amplified by a portable speaker. "Welcome to Mars, recruits," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You're here because you answered the call. You're here because you want to fight for your home, for your families, for your future." She paused, her gaze sweeping across their faces. "But let me be clear," she continued, her voice dropping to a menacing growl. "This isn't a game. This is war, and war is hell." Anya's stomach clenched. She had seen the images of the war, the destruction, the suffering. But now, she was about to experience it firsthand. The commander gestured towards a row of armored vehicles waiting nearby. "Get on board," she ordered. "We're taking you to boot camp, and trust me, it's not going to be a picnic." Anya climbed into one of the vehicles, her heart pounding. The doors slammed shut, sealing them in. The engine roared to life, and they lurched forward, leaving the safety of the landing zone behind. As the vehicle sped across the Martian landscape, Anya looked out the window, the red dust swirling in their wake. The vastness of the desert, the endless expanse of sky, it all felt so alien, so far removed from the green hills and familiar faces of her home. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. This was her new reality now. The transport vehicle shuddered to a halt, its engines sputtering into silence. The doors hissed open, revealing a sprawling complex of concrete and steel structures, bathed in the harsh red light of the Martian sun. The air was thin and dry, carrying the faint scent of ozone and dust. Anya stepped out onto the red soil, her boots sinking slightly into the loose gravel. The recruits around her, a motley crew of civilians turned soldiers, blinked in the harsh light, their faces a mix of apprehension and determination. A drill sergeant, his voice a booming echo across the Martian plain, greeted them. "Welcome to hell, maggots," he roared, his face contorted in a fearsome scowl. "This ain't no vacation. This is where we forge you into weapons, into the sharpest tools in humanity's arsenal." He paced before them, his eyes scanning their ranks. "You're here because you think you've got what it takes to fight the Council," he sneered. "But let me tell you, most of you won't make it. You'll break, you'll quit, you'll beg for mercy. Only the strongest, the most dedicated, will survive." Anya felt a shiver run down her spine. She had volunteered, yes, but was she truly prepared for what lay ahead? The sergeant's voice cut through her thoughts. "Now move," he barked. "Double time to the barracks. You've got 5 minutes." The recruits scrambled into formation, their boots kicking up clouds of red dust as they ran toward the imposing concrete structures in the distance. Anya, her heart pounding in her chest, forced herself to keep pace, her lungs burning in the thin Martian air. The barracks were Spartan, the beds hard and unforgiving. The recruits, exhausted from their run, collapsed onto their bunks, their bodies aching, their minds reeling from the sergeant's harsh welcome. Anya lay on her back, staring at the ceiling. The artificial lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the concrete walls. She closed her eyes, the image of her family flashing before her. Her mother's tearful face, her father's silent nod of approval, her brother's innocent wave goodbye. They were counting on her. She couldn't let them down. She opened her eyes, the flickering lights reflecting in their depths. Her jaw clenched, her fingers curling into fists. She wouldn't let the fear win. She wouldn't let them down. With a determined push, she swung her legs off the bunk, the metal frame creaking in protest. Ignoring the ache in her muscles, she stood tall, her gaze fixed on the door. "Tomorrow," she muttered to herself, her voice a low growl. "Tomorrow, the fight begins." Several months of intense training later, the vastness of space was a battlefield, stars replaced by the cold, calculating lights of warships. The human fleet, a swarm of bio-organic leviathans, faced the onslaught of the Council's armada. sleek, metallic warships unleashed a barrage of energy beams and missiles, their destructive power illuminating the void in a chaotic display of light and explosions. Anya, her heart pounding in her chest, gripped the controls of her Leviathan. The ship's organic interface, a network of pulsing veins and glowing nodes, responded to her touch, a seamless connection between pilot and vessel. Enemy fighter, 12 o'clock. Her calm officer's voice crackled in her ear, a sharp edge of fear cutting through the adrenaline rush. Anya reacted instantly, her hands flying across the controls. The Leviathan twisted and turned, its movements a graceful ballet of defiance. Energy cannons roared, launching bio-organic projectiles that ripped through the enemy fighter, leaving a trail of smoking debris in its wake. "Nice shot, Petrov," Eva's voice came over the calm, a reassuring presence amidst the chaos. "Keep your eyes peeled. They're coming in from all sides." Anya nodded, her gaze sweeping across the tactical display. The battlefield was a maelstrom of light and shadow, explosions erupting against the backdrop of stars. Leviathans and Council warships clashed in a brutal dance of destruction, their weapons tearing through metal and flesh. The air in the cockpit was heavy with the metallic tang of ozone and the faint, earthy scent of the ship's living systems. Anya's hands were slick with sweat, her breath coming in ragged gasps. A Council cruiser, its shields flickering, lumbered into her sights. Anya's lips tightened into a grim line. "Target acquired," she said, her voice a cold whisper. Firing. The Leviathan's bio-organic cannons unleashed a concentrated blast of energy, the beams converging on the cruiser's weakened shields. The enemy ship shuddered, its hull buckling under the assault. A cheer erupted on the bridge as the Council ship exploded in a fiery ball of debris. But the celebration was short-lived. The remaining warships, their formation broken, now attacked with a renewed ferocity. The Leviathan shuddered under the onslaught, its organic systems working overtime to repair the damage. Eva fought to maintain control, her hands flying across the controls, her every move mirrored by the ship's intuitive responses. "We can't keep this up," Dr. Liu's voice was grave, his face pale. "The ship's energy reserves are depleting rapidly." Anya's heart sank. They were running out of time, out of options. And then she felt it. A subtle shift in the ship's consciousness, a wave of primal hunger emanating from its core. "The ship, it's hungry," she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of awe and terror. The Leviathan lurched forward, its movements no longer evasive but predatory. Its maw, once a gaping wound, now pulsed with a ravenous energy. "What's happening?" Turner's voice was filled with panic. "It's feeding," Dr. Liu said, his eyes wide with a mix of horror and fascination. "It's consuming the enemy ships." The Leviathan closed in on its prey, its organic tendrils lashing out, ensnaring the Council warships. The enemy vessels struggled, their weapons firing futilely against the bio-organic armor. One by one, they were drawn into the Leviathan's maw, their metal hulls dissolving, their energy absorbed. The ship grew stronger with each kill, its luminescence intensifying. The remaining Council ships, their formation shattered, turned and fled. The Leviathan gave chase, its hunger driving it forward. Anya watched the retreating enemy, a sense of triumph warring with a deep unease. They had won this battle, but at what cost? The ship they had created was a monster, a force of nature unleashed upon the galaxy. She turned to Dr. Liu, her eyes searching his. "Can we control it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Liu hesitated, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. "I don't know, Captain," he admitted. "We've awakened something. Ancient. Something powerful. And we may not be able to contain it." Eva's heart sank. They had resisted the Council, yes. But had they unleashed an even greater threat upon the universe? The Leviathan returned to Luna, its hunger sated for now. The vastness of space was ablaze with the fury of battle. The human fleet, a swarm of bio-organic Leviathans, clashed with the overwhelming might of the Council's armada. Sleek, metallic warships, once symbols of unchallenged power, now burned and shattered under the onslaught of the living ships. Anya, her heart thrumming in sync with a Leviathan's bio-organic pulse, navigated the chaos with a focused intensity. Her hands danced across the controls, her every move an extension of the ship's will. Enemy cruiser, 3 o'clock, her calm officer's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the cacophony of battle. Anya reacted instantly, the Leviathan twisting and turning with an agility that defied its massive size. Energy cannons roared, spitting bio-organic projectiles that tore through the enemy vessel's shields. The cruiser shuddered, its hull buckling under the relentless assault. Anya felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal satisfaction at the sight of her enemy's destruction. But the battle raged on. The Council's fleet, though outnumbered, fought with a desperate ferocity. One by one, human ships fell, their screams of terror lost in the cold vacuum of space. Anya's Leviathan shuddered as an enemy blast struck its flank. Pain flared through the ship's consciousness, a shared agony that echoed in her own body. The ship's organic systems worked overtime to repair the damage, but the attacks were relentless. "We're losing shields," the calm officer's voice was a panicked cry. "They're targeting the core." Anya's breath hitched. The core, the heart of the Leviathan, was their most vulnerable point. If it was destroyed, the ship would die, and so would she. But she couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not when they were so close to victory. She glanced at the tactical display, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The Council's flagship, a monstrous behemoth bristling with weapons, loomed in the distance. It was the key, the linchpin of their entire fleet. If they could destroy it, the Council's resolve would crumble. Anya made a decision that would seal her fate, but potentially save countless lives. "I'm going in," she said, her voice calm despite the pounding of her heart. "I'm going to take out the flagship." Eva's voice crackled over the comm, filled with a mix of horror and admiration. "Anya, no, it's a suicide mission." "It's our only chance," Anya replied, her voice steady. "I won't let them win. Not after everything we've sacrificed." She pushed the Leviathan to its limits, its engines screaming as it hurtled towards the flagship. Enemy fire rained down on her, the ship's armor buckling and reforming under the onslaught. Anya gritted her teeth, ignoring the pain, the fear. She was a warrior now, and she would fight to the end. She reached the flagship, its massive hull dwarfing her own. Its weapons blazed, their energy beams searing the Leviathan's flesh. But Anya pressed on, her ship a relentless predator, its maw gaping open, its hunger insatiable. She rammed into the flagship, the impact sending shockwaves through both vessels. The Leviathan's tendrils latched onto the enemy's hull, tearing through metal and circuitry. Anya felt the ship's consciousness merge with her own, their shared will a powerful force. She could feel the flagship's energy, its life force, flowing into the Leviathan, fueling its insatiable hunger. But the flagship was fighting back, its weapons tearing into the Leviathan's core. Anya screamed as pain ripped through her vision blurring, her body convulsing. But she held on, her grip tightening on the controls. She wouldn't let go, not until the very end. With a final surge of energy, the Leviathan breached the flagship's core, its maw devouring the enemy's heart. A blinding flash of light erupted, engulfing both ships in a fiery embrace. And then, silence. The battlefield fell quiet, the only sound the soft hiss of escaping atmosphere and the distant crackle of dying stars. The Council flagship, its once mighty form now a twisted wreck, drifted aimlessly through the void. On Earth, Sarah Turner watched the newsfeed, her heart in her throat. The image of Anya's Leviathan, swallowed by the explosion, burned into her mind. She collapsed to her knees, her sobs echoing through the empty house. Her daughter, her brave, beautiful Anya, was gone. But even as she grieved, she knew that Anya's sacrifice had not been in vain. The Council's fleet was in retreat, their arrogance shattered, their power broken. Humanity had won. The final image on the newsfeed was of the triumphant human fleet, their bio-organic ships a stark contrast against the blackness of space. The words scrolled across the screen, a declaration of victory that echoed through the silent living room. Galactic Council demanded tribute, so humans unleashed their carnivorous ships. Sarah Turner stared at the screen, her heart a hollow void. The victory felt empty, meaningless. Her daughter, her brave, beautiful Anya, was gone. The weight of her loss pressed down on her, crushing her spirit. Her husband, his own face etched with grief, knelt beside her, his arms wrapping around her trembling form. "She's a hero," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She saved us all." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. She knew it was true. Anya had given her life for humanity, for their future. But the knowledge did little to ease the pain. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft sobs that racked Sarah's body. The toy spaceship, once a symbol of Anya's dreams and aspirations, now lay forgotten on the floor. The victory celebrations outside felt distant, muted. The cheers and laughter were a jarring contrast to the emptiness that consumed Sarah's heart. Humanity had won, yes, but at what cost? The price of freedom, it seemed, was paid in blood and tears. And for Sarah Turner, that price was too high. The end.